Welcome in. Tonight, we're traveling to a world wrapped in lace and soot, the Victorian Age. It's a time many imagine in black and white photographs, where gaslight flickers over cobbled streets and elegance hides behind every curtain. But the truth was far heavier. For most, life wasn't tea and manners. It was smoke in the lungs, hunger in the belly, and fear in the silence. Children climbed chimneys. Women vanished under corsets and expectations. And the poor? They vanished altogether. Still, there's a strange beauty in it, not in the suffering, but in the resilience, the quiet ways people found to endure another dawn. Before we begin, feel free to like or subscribe if these slow, honest journeys through history speak to you. And I'd love to know, where are you watching from? What time is it there? I always find comfort in knowing we're scattered across the globe, sharing these strange little nights together. Now settle in, breathe slow. The past is waiting. Tonight, we step into a world that smells of chimney smoke and chamber pots, where horse-drawn carriages clatter past corpses slumped in gutters, and the soot-black skyline hides the sun more often than clouds ever could. The Victorian Age. It evokes lace gloves, measured speech, and gaslight romance. But that image is a lie polished by novels and nostalgia. This is not the era of sentimental ballads or watercolor courtships. It is a time of filth, fear, and unfathomable inequality, where progress marched forward on the backs of the broken. If you imagine you could walk into this century wearing your curiosity like a costume, think again. The age would not welcome you. It would devour you. You wouldn't last a single day. There is no safety net here. The Industrial Revolution is in full violent swing, and every cog in the machine is greased with sweat and blood. Factories roar day and night. Smog lingers over cities like a second sky. Men die in mills. Children crawl through chimneys for pennies. Women faint from hunger behind storefront windows, their corsets cinched so tight they can barely breathe. And yet the world calls this progress. The rich cloistered behind velvet curtains and liveried servants, toast to empire and innovation. Meanwhile, the poor stagger through back alleys, their faces hollowed out by disease and desperation. You'll hear the phrase, Victorian values, thrown around like a compliment in modern times. But here, those values are cruel. They reward conformity and punish need. Piety is performative. Morality is weaponized. If you're starving, it's not because the system failed. It's because you were weak. The starving child? A lesson in self-reliance. The battered wife? A symbol of domestic harmony. This is a time when sin is punished with public shaming, and virtue means dying quietly. Society is obsessed with appearances, and yet beneath the surface, everything rots. You, dropped into this world, would be no different from any other transient figure in the crowd. You wouldn't be a visitor. You'd be just another vulnerable body in a city that eats its own. Your lungs would seize in the smoke-choked air. Your skin would blister in the sun, then crack in the cold. There's no bottled water here, no antibiotics, no electric lights to ward off the night. Every luxury you take for granted is science fiction to them, and every inconvenience they endure is lethal to you. This is not a theme park. It's not a fantasy. It's London in 1851, Manchester in 1870, Glasgow in the rain, and Liverpool in mourning. And so we begin, not with a grand entrance, but with a gasp. You are not special here. You're just another set of lungs to blacken, another pair of feet to blister. The Victorian Age doesn't want your fascination. It wants your silence, your labor, and your slow decay. Welcome to the smoke age. The clock is already ticking. There is no alarm clock, just the sound of boots clomping upstairs, someone coughing hard enough to retch, and the wet rhythmic drip of a leak that's found the corner of your straw-stuffed mattress. You open your eyes to a ceiling stained brown with old water damage, its cracks webbed like veins over flaking plaster. The air smells of mold, dust, and something sour that you stopped trying to identify weeks ago. Your chest feels heavy, like you've slept with a coal sack pressed against your ribs. When you try to breathe deeply, your lungs resist. There's a catch, a rattle, and then the cough comes, loud, raw, and familiar. This is your good morning, not the gentle hum of birdsong or sunlit windows, but a hacking reminder that the air you breathe is slowly killing you. You share this space with others, siblings, strangers, maybe even rats. Privacy doesn't exist in your world, just degrees of closeness. You're lucky if no one has pissed the shared chamber pot during the night, or vomited from drink or illness. There's no stove, no insulation. The walls are too thin to block out the sound of fighting from the next room, or the groaning of the building itself as it contracts in the cold. The mattress beneath you is barely more than a flattened bag of straw, and it creaks when you shift. You feel it then. Movement, lice, fleas, maybe bedbugs, tiny invisible horrors exploring your skin, biting, burrowing, nesting in the seams of your clothes and the threads of your blanket. You scratch, but there's no point. You'll still be scratching tomorrow. When you swing your legs over the side of the bed, your feet meet floorboards so cold, they sting. The room has no rug, no fire, no warmth of any kind. If it's winter, you can see your breath curl in the air like smoke. You're already dressed in yesterday's clothes, because changing isn't something you do daily. It's something you do when the fabric gives out, or lice drive you to it. Your shirt clings to you, stiff with sweat and soot. The socks you wore to sleep are damp. The chill creeps into your bones and doesn't leave. There's no mirror, but you can picture your face, pale, smudged, eyes puffy from restless sleep, nose crusted with soot-laced mucus. You wipe it on your sleeve without thinking. You're not lazy, you're exhausted, and it's only just begun. You glance at the window, streaked with filth, framed in rot. No sun, just fog. A gray haze that barely distinguishes sky from smoke. And through it, the sound of the city waking. Hooves on cobbles, distant shouting, the hiss of steam, the clank of metal. Everything industrial, everything indifferent. You stand up, your legs ache, your head spins, but you move anyway. Because you have to. There's no breakfast waiting, no bathroom to stumble into. Just another day in a room that doesn't love you, in a city that doesn't see you. And this is only the first 5 minutes. The cold doesn't greet you, it assaults you. It enters your room like an uninvited ghost, pressing against your skin, sliding into your joints, settling behind your eyes. There is no central heating, no radiator hum, no thermostat you can adjust. Just an empty hearth with a few white flecks of yesterday's ash, and maybe, if you're lucky, a splinter of half-burnt wood. The fireplace is purely decorative most of the time, its soot-lined mouth yawning in useless silence. Coal is expensive, rationed, hoarded like gold by those who can afford it. You cannot. What little warmth exists in this room comes from your own breath, and even that curls out of your mouth in cloudy bursts before vanishing into the frostbitten air. The walls, lined with thin plaster and poorly joined timber, do nothing to stop the freeze. Wind leaks in through cracks in the frame, and the loose pane rattles with every gust. shrieking faintly like a child wailing far away. Your clothes don't insulate. They preserve the cold. The cotton shirt you wear under your coat has absorbed the night's damp, and now it clings to your back like a wet rag. You can feel each rib, each vertebrae, not from self-awareness, but because the cold outlines them with surgical precision. The chill isn't just around you, it's inside you. It lives in your bones. You move slowly, not because you want to savor the moment, but because every action is a negotiation with pain. The muscles in your fingers don't want to close around your boots. Your knees creak as you bend. Your breath is shallow because deep inhalation feels like swallowing ice. You shuffle toward the door and glance at the bucket in the corner, half filled with slush from last night's melted snow. You could wash your face in it, but doing so would feel like punishment. The water bites harder than soap ever could. Most mornings, you just splash and endure the sting. That sting, at least, wakes you faster than tea or coffee ever could, neither of which you'll see today. If you're outdoors for work or errands, the world offers no reprieve. The streets are lined with gray slush, streaked with soot and horse waste, freezing solid in the shadows. The wind knifes through your clothes, past collars and sleeves, under hems. There is no warm shopfront to duck into. Most establishments don't welcome loiterers, and even if you can stand near a steam vent or bakery chimney, it's only seconds of borrowed comfort before you're pushed away again. You walk hunched, gloved hands shoved deep into threadbare pockets, boots soaked through and hard as iron around your toes. Frostbite isn't an emergency here. It's a hazard of the season. Everyone knows someone who lost a toe, a finger, a foot. Children are bundled tight in rags, cheeks chapped red, and hands cracked raw. Elders cough blood behind shawls, and infants shiver into stillness. The cold here doesn't kill quickly. It lingers. It gnaws. It makes you brittle, and then it breaks you. And still, you go out into it, because staying inside changes nothing. The chill lives there too. Breakfast, if you can even call it that, isn't a meal. It's a formality. You wake up already hollow, your stomach gnawing at itself like a trapped thing. But what waits on the table is an insult to the word food. A crust of bread so hard it could bruise your gums. A chipped tin mug of something pretending to be milk. And maybe, if you're fortunate or unfortunate depending on perspective, a smear of lard scraped from yesterday's pan. There's no butter, no fruit, no bacon sizzling in the pan. The smell of breakfast doesn't drift through the room because nothing's been cooked. The air is still cold and damp, heavy with mildew and old coal smoke, not warmth or comfort. You sit on a stool with uneven legs, holding the stale bread in one hand and trying not to crack a tooth as you chew. It crumbles like chalk and tastes like dust. You chew slowly, not to savor the flavor. There is none, but to trick your body into believing it's full. The milk, watered down and tepid, has a faint sourness to it. You sniff, wince, drink anyway. You have no choice. Hunger overrules disgust. You learned long ago that even spoiled things still count as sustenance if they stay down. And if you're unlucky, there's a bit of grit in the bread, a sign it was ground too close to the stones, or worse, contaminated by droppings from a rat that scurried across the countertop in the night. No one mentions it. Everyone sees it. Everyone keeps eating. For children, there's nothing extra. No sweets, no hot cereal, no juice. A scrap of bread in each hand, if there's enough to go around. Toddlers chew without question, conditioned by constant hunger. Mothers watch with hollow eyes, calculating silently how many days the flour sack will stretch. How many meals until rationing becomes starvation? Fathers, if they're still alive or not at work before dawn, may skip their share entirely, less from nobility than resignation. Their strength isn't what it used to be. They know what real hunger costs. Better the children eat. Sometimes on Sundays, if wages haven't been cut and there's no sickness in the house, you get a sliver of pickled something, herring perhaps, or the thin end of a sausage, boiled until it turns gray and rubbery. But today is not Sunday. Today is a weekday, and weekdays are cruel. The table is splintered. The room is silent except for chewing and the occasional wheeze from someone's lungs working overtime. No one speaks. Speaking uses energy, and energy is better spent walking, working, or simply enduring. You don't linger. Breakfast isn't a time to gather, joke, plan. It's an obligation, something you do quickly before the day takes more from you than it already has. When you rise from your seat, the bread still sits like a rock in your gut, and your thirst remains. But you've done what you could. You've eaten, or at least, you've tried. And in the Victorian Age, that has to count for something. You feel it before you smell it. The thick, sour stench of waste that never fully leaves. It clings to everything. Your blankets, your hair, your breath. The room may look tidy in the early morning gloom, but hidden beneath the bed is the centerpiece of Victorian sanitation. A chamber pot, half full and cold to the touch. There's no plumbing here, no toilet flush, no porcelain throne behind a closed door. Just a stained ceramic bowl that everyone in the room, sometimes 2, 3, even 5 people, uses through the night. Privacy doesn't exist. You relieve yourself in front of family, whispering apologies you stopped meaning years ago. And in the morning, someone empties it. Maybe it's you. Maybe it's a younger sibling, gagging as they carry the sloshing pot through narrow halls and down crumbling staircases. If you're lucky, there's a designated place in the alley, a shared privy, a hole in the ground with rotting planks and maggots dancing across the surface. If you're not, you toss the contents into the gutter, praying no one's walking below. The streets of the city are paved with human filth. Night soil, they call it. Men make a living collecting it, carting it through the streets at dawn, their boots coated in muck, their eyes half dead. You don't envy them, but someone has to carry the city's guts away. Until then, it pools in corners, seeps into cellars, and festers beneath floorboards. In some homes, especially the poorest tenements, there is no privy at all. Just a bucket in a corner of the kitchen, hidden behind a curtain, or nothing at all. Children squat over it as rats scurry past their feet. In boarding houses, entire floors might share one outhouse, built behind the building, walls leaning, door broken, its hole overflowing and crawling with flies. The path to it is slick with urine, and you know better than to go barefoot. If you wait too long, your only option is the alley wall, a newspaper, or the corner of a stairwell, just like everyone else. The city doesn't punish this. The city expects it. But it's not just the smell that hangs in the air. It's disease. The entire infrastructure is a breeding ground. Human waste seeps into the water supply. The same stream that quenches your thirst by day carries cholera by night. You boil what you can, but firewood is scarce, and water doesn't always come from a clean source. Public pumps, like the infamous Broad Street pump in London, become monuments to suffering. One sip, and you could be writhing in bed by sundown, your stomach turning inside out, your body shriveling from within. Children die first, then the elderly, then the strong. The smell never fades. It becomes a part of you. It seeps into your clothes, your skin, your understanding of normal. The city is alive with it, humming with the quiet rot of thousands of bodies, expelling everything they have, day after day. And through it all, you carry your pot, your shame, and the weight of a society that builds monuments on streets lined with shit. Victorian sanitation wasn't primitive. It was a gamble. And most of the time, you lost. Cleanliness in the Victorian Age isn't about comfort. It's about desperation. You don't bathe to feel refreshed. You bathe to keep the itch from driving you mad. But even that small victory is rare. Hot water is a dream, something whispered about but never seen. You wake covered in sweat from too many bodies crammed into one room, the sheets damp with shared breath and the residue of the day before. If you're lucky, there's a tin basin in the corner filled with a few inches of cold water left from yesterday. If you're even luckier, it's only been used once. There is no bathroom. There is no plumbing. The basin is metal, dented and rusted, its water cloudy before you even begin. A small rag, stiff from previous use, rests beside it. Soap, if you have it, is the size of a matchbox and smells vaguely of lye and mildew. You scrape it across your arms and neck, trying to make it last. It doesn't lather. It just leaves a bitter residue that tells you something, anything, has touched your skin besides dirt. You wash, standing up, hunched, teeth clenched, as cold water trickles down your spine, your breath catching from the shock. You don't clean your whole body. There isn't time. There isn't privacy. There isn't water. Hair is another battle entirely. Oily, heavy, and home to more than just dandruff. Lice aren't a possibility. They're a certainty. You scratch constantly. Your scalp is raw. If you can find vinegar, you use it. If not, you part your hair and hope no one sees them crawling. Children cry at night from the bites. Adults suffer in silence. Knit combs, passed down or borrowed, become treasured weapons in a losing war. Clothing doesn't help. Layers worn too long, too often, trapping heat and sweat and stink beneath wool and cotton. Washing your clothes requires hauling them to a shared wash house or scrubbing them in a basin so small you barely fit a shirt inside. You wear them until they reek, then longer. Smell is not a personal failing here. It is the atmosphere. Everyone smells. Of coal smoke, of filth, of rot and oil, and the perfume of a city that never truly dries out. The rich bathe in porcelain tubs, behind curtains, with servants heating kettles over fireplaces. But for the poor, a full-body bath is a monthly event, if that. You wash your feet because they touch the worst of the world. You wash your face because it's the first thing people see. Everything else waits until you can afford the time, the privacy, the water. You stop thinking of cleanliness as a state. It becomes a fleeting moment, a brief lessening of grime, a truce between you and the filth that clings to every pore. You dream of clean sheets, of steam, of soap that smells like something other than ash. But when you wake, you're still wrapped in sweat and dust. In the Victorian Age, you don't stay clean. You just try not to rot. Getting dressed in the Victorian Age isn't about fashion. It's about endurance. Before you even open your eyes fully, you're already bracing for the ritual. The air is cold, your breath fogs in the dim light, and your fingers, stiff from sleep and the damp, fumble with buttons and laces that feel like they were designed to humiliate. There is no comfort in the garments you wear. They are stiff, scratchy, and tight in all the wrong places. Your clothes are not an expression of identity. They're a uniform of suffering, worn by everyone from chimney sweeps to housemaids to factory boys with soot behind their ears. Start with the underlayer, if you're lucky enough to have one. Chemises or drawers made from coarse, yellowing linen. They reek of old sweat and the mildew of shared laundry basins. Then come the layers. Petticoats for women, thick trousers for men, shirts with collars that dig into the neck, wool coats that retain moisture like sponges and never fully dry once wet. The more fabric you wear, the more respectable you appear, but each layer weighs you down until movement feels like wading through a bog. And if you're poor, you don't have layers. You have whatever's been patched enough times to still cling to your body. Holes in the elbows, knees, underarms. Threadbare, damp, and always a size too small or too large, because no one gets anything new. For women, the corset is not optional. It doesn't just shape the body. It reshapes the lungs, the ribs, the spine. You hold your breath to fasten it, pulling the laces so tight your vision swims. Breathing becomes a calculated effort. Sitting feels like being stabbed slowly in the gut. You can't bend. You can't slouch. But you must wear it, because a loose figure is scandalous. And being scandalous is more dangerous than being uncomfortable. Girls start young, 10, maybe 12, learning to lace themselves in, to wear their restraints with pride. The bruises, the fainting, the broken ribs, quiet side effects of modesty and class. Children fare no better. Hand-me-downs pass from one sibling to the next until they barely hold together. Shoes with holes, boots too small, coats that drag along the ground. Boys button into stiff uniforms for school or work, collars digging in like shackles. Girls are swaddled in dresses too formal for play, sleeves puffed up with starch, bonnets tied so tight they leave red lines under the chin. It's not cute. It's not quaint. It's how you dress, when clothing is both a badge and a burden. The result? You don't feel human in your clothes. You feel buried. You itch constantly, sweat and freeze in equal measure, and bear the weight of wool and shame in every movement. The wealthy walk with elegance because servants dress them. The rest of the world staggers forward under the weight of poverty woven into every thread. Your clothes don't keep you warm. They trap the cold inside. They don't give you dignity. They enforce it, like a law stitched in every seam. In the Victorian Age, getting dressed is not preparation, it's punishment. School in the Victorian Age isn't a sanctuary, it's a gauntlet. The moment you step inside the cold, echoing classroom, you're met not with warmth or curiosity, but with silence, thick enough to suffocate. The desks are wooden boxes, hard-edged and unforgiving, polished not by care, but by years of elbows, tears, and the frantic scribble of slates. You sit upright, hands folded, eyes forward, not out of respect, but fear. Because at any moment, the teacher's gaze might land on you, and if it does, you'd better be ready to answer. If you're not, pain is waiting. Education for most is not a right. It's a weapon wielded by the system to mold you into obedience. Your schoolmaster is not a guide. He is a warden. He smells of chalk dust and pipe smoke, and his authority is absolute. The leather strap sits on his desk like a silent promise. The cane leans in the corner, always in view, ready to remind any child who stutters, slouches, or sighs that learning is to be earned in bruises. Speak out of turn, lash across the knuckles, fail to memorize a passage, bent over the desk, fidget too much. You're standing in the corner, arms raised, face burning as the rest of the class stares without blinking. There is no room for wonder here, no room for questions, curiosity, or comfort. Lessons are recited, not taught. Rote memorization is everything. You chant multiplication tables like prayers. You copy moral aphorisms over and over. Cleanliness is next to godliness. Idle hands are the devil's tools. You are not being taught how to think. You're being taught how to repeat, to conform, to remain silent. Boys learn discipline. Girls learn obedience. If your handwriting is shaky, your penmanship book fills with red ink and the sharp sting of correction. If your hands tremble from cold or nerves, too bad. Tears only earn more scorn. The classroom itself is a box of discomfort. Drafts creep through cracked windows. The fire, if lit at all, heats the teacher's seat, not the pupils. Your fingers are numb, your nose runs, and the ink in your well freezes to slush on the worst mornings. Slates shatter if dropped, and chalk dust coats your clothes. You carry your school books, if you have them, in a string bag or tied with twine, already frayed and falling apart. And yet, despite it all, you go back. Because if you don't, you're in the factories or on the streets. School might be cruel, but life without it is worse. And so you endure. You learn your letters with bloodied knuckles, your sums through tear-blurred eyes. You memorize, not because you understand, but because getting it wrong hurts. School isn't a place of learning. It's a place of survival. And the only lesson that truly sticks? Keep your head down, your back straight, and your answers ready. Or the cane will find its way to your hands. The factory bell doesn't ring. It screams, a harsh clang that slices through the dawn like a warning shot, yanking you out of whatever shallow, restless sleep you managed to find on your straw pallet. There is no gentle morning here, no breakfast table, no stretch and yawn. You're up because you have to be, because being late could mean losing the day's wages, or worse, getting sacked entirely. And if you're a child, it's not school that waits. It's labor. Long, punishing, endless labor under the iron law of industrial timekeeping. You stumble through the smog-choked streets, past rows of blackened brick, your breath visible in the cold, your hands already numb. The mill rises like a fortress against the sky, tall chimneys belching smoke, windows flickering with lantern light behind soot-streaked glass. Inside, it's louder than anything you've ever imagined. A roar of machines that never stops. Belts turning, gears grinding, pistons hissing. It drowns out thought, drowns out speech, drowns out everything except the pounding ache in your head and the throb in your feet. Your shift is 12 hours if you're lucky. 14 is more common. You start before the sun rises and leave long after it sets, stepping into darkness at both ends of the day. There are no real breaks, just moments to gulp cold tea or chew a crust of bread, often while still standing, still working. The overseers walk the floors with sticks or shouts, ready to bark at a slouch, to lash out at a mistake. Fall behind? You're called lazy. Collapse? You're dragged off the floor and replaced. For children, the danger is constant. Your small hands are perfect for cleaning between fast-moving gears, retrieving cotton tufts or clearing snags. One slip and you lose a finger, a hand, an arm. And there's no compensation, no apology, just a curt dismissal, a ruined future, and another body lined up outside to take your place. The floors are slick with oil and dust. The air is thick with lint that clogs your lungs and lines your throat. Coughing is common, so is spitting blood. You breathe in death with every inhale, and you're told to be grateful for the work. There is no noise regulation, no ear protection. The machines pound on for hours, day after day, until the sound is etched into your bones. You begin to hear it in your sleep, if you can sleep at all. Many workers go deaf, some go mad, most simply grow old before they're 20, Your body wears out faster than your clothes. Your spine curves, your fingers ache, your eyes strain. And for what? A pittance. Enough to buy bread, maybe soap. Never comfort. This isn't childhood. This isn't even life. This is survival by submission, breath by breath, gear by gear. The factory bell doesn't start the day. It starts the punishment. And it won't stop ringing until your body gives out, or the machines finally do. In the Victorian Age, you don't grow up. You grow broken. There's no fresh air in the Victorian city, only a haze that clings to your lungs like wet wool. Every breath tastes like fire and ash. You wake up coughing, and you go to sleep the same way, hacking up dark streaks into your handkerchief, if you even have one. The walls of your room are stained with soot. So is your hair. So are your teeth. The sky above is permanently gray, not from clouds, but from the endless belching of factory chimneys, coal stoves, and locomotives. This isn't weather. It's the environment. And you live in it, eat in it, work in it, until it kills you. Industrial illness is the silent executioner of the age. Soot lung, they call it, though doctors might prefer the more clinical pneumoconiosis. It doesn't matter. The result is the same. Your lungs fill slowly with grit, year after year, until you can no longer draw a full breath. Walking becomes hard, then talking, then even lying still brings wheezing. It starts early. Children working in mines or mills start coughing in their first year. By their teens, some are already crippled with breathlessness. And there's no cure, no inhalers, no antibiotics. Just the vague hope that rest will help, and the cold reality that rest means hunger. Then there's iron leg. It sounds strong. It isn't. It's the result of long hours spent standing in one place, day after day, sometimes in water, sometimes in the same twisted posture, handling hot metal or heavy machines. Your veins swell, your joints lock, your knees buckle. Sometimes you can't straighten up at all. By middle age, you walk like someone 3 times your age. And that's assuming you still have your limbs. Because iron leg also means injuries, metal plates crushing bones, gears snapping limbs. If your leg gets caught, it's gone. No surgery, no prosthetics, just a tourniquet, a crude amputation, and a life spent begging in the streets. But none of this grants you any mercy. There's no workers' comp, no sick leave, no doctor waiting with white gloves and kind words. Medical attention means hoping the local apothecary gives you the right herb or doesn't charge you too much for a bottle of laudanum that dulls the pain just enough to keep working. You wrap your chest, bind your knee, grit your teeth, and carry on. Because stopping means starvation. And no one pities the idle, no matter how black your spit or how twisted your walk. Every factory, every coal mine, every foggy alley is a breeding ground for illness. Tuberculosis, typhoid, rickets, industrial poisoning. Your body becomes a map of what it's endured. Your cough is your soundtrack. Your limp is your legacy. You are dying, slowly, publicly, and no one will save you. Not the government, not the church, not even the doctor who shrugs and tells you to rest. The air is poison, the work is war, and your body is the battlefield. Welcome to industrial illness. In the Victorian Age, death doesn't come suddenly. It comes breath by breath. In the Victorian Age, being born female wasn't a condition. It was a sentence. From the moment you took your first breath, the world around you narrowed its expectations to one word: obedience. You belonged to someone. First your father, then your husband, perhaps your employer, and always the rigid, suffocating expectations of a society built entirely for men. You had no legal identity of your own. You could not vote. You could not own property if you married. And if your husband decided to beat you, abandon you, or take your children away, the law stood back and let him. Because under the law, you weren't a person. You were his. Marriage was not a romantic escape. It was a legally sanctioned transfer of control. Once wed, everything you owned became his. Money, belongings, even your body. If he demanded sex, you had no right to refuse. The law didn't recognize marital rape because it didn't believe a wife had the right to deny her husband anything. Your home became your prison. Your role was to serve, to bear children, to keep quiet. If you suffered, you were expected to suffer silently. If you protested, you were hysterical, rebellious, dangerous. And if you tried to leave, you had nowhere to go. There were no shelters, no support systems, no real hope of escape. For unmarried women, the choices weren't kinder. You might work as a governess, a maid, a seamstress, jobs that paid barely enough to survive and left you vulnerable to harassment, exploitation, and social ruin. A rumor could destroy you. A single misstep, real or imagined, could label you a fallen woman, a term that meant everything and nothing, used to excuse every form of cruelty. If you were assaulted, the blame was yours. If you were too poor to marry, you were a burden. If you had a child out of wedlock, you were scum. And no one, not the law, not the church, not your own family, would come to your defense. Even wealthy women, draped in lace and lace-up corsets, lived lives of gilded confinement. Their minds were dismissed, their voices silenced. They were paraded as symbols of decorum and refinement, but rarely permitted real power or education. Their greatest ambition? To marry well, to produce sons, and to avoid scandal. They were praised for their beauty, pitied for their intelligence, and punished for their opinions. Step outside the narrow script, and you'd find yourself whispered about, ostracized, or institutionalized. Victorian men had the authority to declare their wives insane and have them locked away for life. It didn't take much. A sharp tongue, a bout of depression, or simply not knowing your place. To be a woman in the Victorian era was to live in constant negotiation with danger, of poverty, of abuse, of invisibility. You weren't just expected to endure. You were expected to smile while doing it. And when you broke under the weight of it all, society didn't call it oppression. It called it weakness. So you adjusted your corset, bit your tongue, and lowered your eyes. Because in this age, survival meant submission. And your freedom, your body, your very name, they were never truly yours to begin with. In the Victorian era, childhood was not a time of innocence. It was a brief, brutal sprint toward usefulness or death. If you were born poor, your life began with risk and rarely improved. Infants died so frequently that parents stopped naming them until they survived their first year. Measles, dysentery, and rot took babies by the basketful, and even the doctor, if one was nearby, was powerless to stop it. Diarrhea was a death sentence. A bad cough could take you overnight. The leading cause of death for children wasn't violence or accident. It was being born into a world that didn't know how to keep them alive. Assuming you lived past infancy, your reward wasn't education or toys. It was labor. You were a body to be used. 6 years old, and you might already be sorting coal, crawling into chimneys, or sweeping debris from factory floors, where gears turned faster than your reflexes. Your small size was valuable. It let you crawl into places adults couldn't fit, under machines, into narrow tunnels, into shafts of death. You were a tool, and if that tool broke, There was another child ready to take your place. No compensation, no apology. Just another tiny corpse in the alley behind the workhouse. For the slightly more fortunate, begging was the trade. Sent into the streets with nothing but a tin cup and sunken eyes, you'd plead for coins from people who looked away. If you brought home nothing, your mother cried. If you brought home too little, your father beat you. Children learned to steal early, not for thrill, but for bread. Pickpocket gangs operated with brutal efficiency, their leaders often ex-convicts or older kids who had learned to survive by controlling others. If you were caught, prison was a possibility, and prison didn't care about your age. Sickness followed you everywhere. Tuberculosis was a constant companion, leaving blood on your pillow and bones sticking through your skin. Rickets bowed your legs. Malnutrition stunted your growth. The city air, thick with smoke and disease, coated your lungs with filth before you even learned to read. Many children never did. School was a privilege, not a right. Even when laws began to enforce education, families often falsified records to keep their children working. It wasn't cruelty, it was survival. One less wage earner meant one more starving mouth. You weren't raised, you were weathered. Your toys were bones and sticks. Your playground was a slum, and your comfort was the knowledge that at least, for now, you were still alive. Because most children didn't get that long. They died in bed, in the street, in the factory, in their mother's arms. There were no campaigns, no safety nets, no child protection services. Childhood in the Victorian Age was just the prelude to a harder adulthood, if you made it that far. And if you didn't, the world moved on without blinking. Because in this world, children weren't precious. They were disposable. If you fall ill in Victorian Britain, your best bet might be to recover on your own, or not at all. Medicine isn't a symbol of hope. It's a coin toss with a rusty blade. Hospitals are more dangerous than the disease that sent you there. They're dark, cold, and crawling with infection. Doctors rarely wash their hands. Surgeons wear the same bloody apron from patient to patient as a badge of experience. The instruments they use, saws, knives, hooks, aren't cleaned between uses. They're wiped, maybe, if the last patient's blood hasn't already dried on the handle. Germ theory exists, barely, but most physicians still see dirt and filth as cosmetic issues, not killers. The first thing you notice when entering a Victorian sick room isn't care, it's dread. There's the faint scent of carbolic acid if you're lucky, but more often, it's a stew of sweat, pus, and urine. Beds are shared, sheets are soiled. Nurses, if present, are usually overworked or untrained. Florence Nightingale's reforms are recent and fragile, and many places still operate like death factories. You don't come to the hospital to get well. You come because you're poor and out of options. The wealthy recover at home, tended by private doctors with silver spoons and stronger opium. Your diagnosis will come without tests. There are no scans, no blood panels, no reliable thermometers. The physician listens to your chest, looks at your tongue, asks a few questions, and makes a confident guess. Treatments range from useless to deadly. Bloodletting is still in fashion. If you're feverish, they might cut open a vein and drain a pint, believing it will balance the humors. Leeches, too. They cling to your skin, while the doctor assures you that sluggish blood is your real enemy. Laxatives are doled out by the handful. Mercury is prescribed without hesitation. If your stomach turns, you're told to keep taking it. Pain relief is inconsistent at best. Ether exists, but it's unstable. Chloroform is popular, though it's known to stop hearts without warning. If you go under for surgery, there's a real chance you won't wake up. If you stay awake, You'll remember every second. And the surgery itself? Brutal. There are no antibiotics, no post-op recovery, no guarantees. Operations are done fast, in 10 minutes or less, to reduce your time on the table. That's not efficiency. That's desperation. Infection is so expected that survival is considered a miracle. Even childbirth isn't safe. Midwives may know more than the doctors, but they're often pushed aside by men with degrees and no understanding of hygiene. Puerperal fever, sepsis from dirty hands, is one of the leading killers of new mothers. And if a woman screams during labor, she's hysterical. If she dies, it's God's will. So if you find yourself in a Victorian clinic, be afraid. The tools are sharp, but the knowledge is blunt. The medicine is primitive, the practitioners confident, and the results often tragic. Here, healing is less about science and more about hope, and too often, hope is misplaced. Entering a Victorian workhouse isn't a cry for help. It's a death rattle dressed in government ink. The moment you walk through its doors, you surrender your name, your dignity, and any illusion that society owes you compassion. You're not here because you're lazy. You're here because you got sick, got laid off, got abandoned, or simply ran out of coin. And in Victorian England, that's all it takes to be labeled undeserving. The workhouse is not salvation. It's punishment wrapped in policy. First, they strip you of your clothes, of your belongings, of your identity. You're given a uniform. Coarse wool, itchy, ill-fitting, identical to everyone else's. No shoes if they're out of stock. No personal items allowed. Then they separate you. Men to one wing, women to another. Children to their own section entirely. Your family, already clinging to survival, is now split across corridors like strangers. No hugs, no shared meals, no comfort. The idea is simple. If the workhouse is too kind, people might abuse it. So it must be cruel. The food, if you can call it that, is designed not to nourish, but to suppress. Gruel, bread, a splash of thin soup, day after day. No seasoning, no variation. Just the kind of bland misery that dulls thought. Watered down milk, if you're lucky. You eat in silence, under watch. Talking is discouraged. Laughter is suspicious. Refusing food, that's a disciplinary offense. They assume you're gaming the system. There's no escape through sickness either. Illness is met not with treatment but isolation, sometimes with a shovel and lime. The labor is relentless. You're not here to rest. You're here to repay your debt to society. Women scrub laundry until their knuckles bleed, or sew uniforms for soldiers they'll never meet. Men break stones or grind bones for fertilizer. Children pick oakum, separating tarred rope with bleeding fingers for hours at a time. It's not meant to be productive. It's meant to be humiliating. A constant reminder that you've failed the invisible test of self-reliance. Punishments are swift. Talk back, collapse from exhaustion, fail to complete your quota, and you're disciplined. Solitary confinement, bread and water meals, privileges revoked. Even a look of defiance can mark you as a troublemaker, and once labeled, that mark sticks. There's no appeals process, no second chances. The overseer is judge, jury, and enforcer, and pity is not part of the policy. And yet, for many, this is better than starving in the streets. That's the horror of it. The workhouse exists not because it helps, but because it's cheaper to control the poor than to save them. It's a warning sign to everyone else. This is what happens when you fall. You don't recover in the workhouse. You don't rebuild. You exist, quietly, mechanically, in a place designed not to elevate you, but to erase you. So if you're poor, sick, alone, and the workhouse door swings open, it's not rescue that greets you. It's the slow grinding machinery of a society that would rather break you than admit it failed you. Step outside your tenement in Victorian London and take a breath, if you dare. The air greets you not with freshness, but with a stench that grips your throat and nestles in your lungs like mold in a damp cellar. It's not just unpleasant, it's chemical warfare from nature and man alike. Every inhalation is a toxic blend of coal smoke, rotting garbage, decomposing animals, and human waste. This is the signature scent of industrial progress, a perfume of putrefaction and poison. The streets are layered in filth. Horse droppings mix with mud, urine, and kitchen refuse, thrown from upper windows without warning. Dead cats lie bloated in gutters. Dogs fight over bones by lamplight. Children wade barefoot through puddles thick enough to hide a corpse. The road sweeps, if they show up, move the mess around more than they clean it. And in the rain, which is often, everything stirs to life. A rancid stew bubbling in the alleys, rising into the air like a curse. But the real horror flows through the veins of the city. The River Thames. Once a symbol of London's pride, now a swirling ribbon of disease. It's not water anymore. It's slurry. Every workhouse, every tannery, every butcher's stall dumps their waste straight in. Blood, offal, excrement, chemical runoff. No filter, no shame. Even corpses find their way into the tide. The river doesn't carry life. It carries death, slowly and proudly, right past the Houses of Parliament, where lawmakers sit gagging behind vinegar-soaked cloths and pretend they don't smell what the rest of the city swims in. During hot summers, the river cooks. The Great Stink of 1858 is just one infamous episode when the heat turned the Thames into a putrid miasma so thick it halted government sessions. The stench wasn't just bad, it was apocalyptic. Curtains were soaked in perfume. Streets were doused with carbolic acid. People fled the riverbanks. And yet, this wasn't an anomaly. It was the peak of a constant simmering crisis. Cholera outbreaks? Traced to the water. Typhoid? Also the water. Infant mortality? Everywhere, but especially near the river. And still, people drank from it. Not directly, but through pumps and wells, fed by groundwater already contaminated. The poor had no choice. Boiling water required fuel, and fuel cost money. So they drank, and they died. Not immediately. Often slowly, with cramping guts, blackened tongues, and fevers that melted their minds. A glass of water was a loaded gun. Even the air indoors offered little refuge. Chimneys coughed soot into living rooms. Gas lamps leaked fumes. Laundry reeked of the city. Your lungs never rested. Your senses never escaped. You breathed in disease, ate it with your bread, wore it on your skin. This isn't the London of novels and foggy romance. It's a city of rot, where every gust of wind carries the breath of the dead, and every sunrise finds you still steeped in a stink that no amount of soap could scrub away. If you can't handle the smell of decay, don't bother stepping foot outside. In Victorian London, foul air is just another part of staying alive. In the dim haze of a London alleyway, a man slumps against the soot-streaked bricks with a tin mug still clutched in his hand. His lips are pale. His eyes flutter. You'd think he's drunk. He is, but not in the way you imagine. The cheap beer he bought from the corner public house wasn't just beer. It was a cocktail of industrial waste and desperation. Brewers, eager to stretch their barrels and fatten their margins, laced their drinks with fillers, chalk to lighten the color, tobacco for bitterness, and strychnine to fake the sharp bite of hops. A single pint could taste off, but when you've had nothing but crusts of bread and misery all day, the tang of poison might feel like warmth. The brewing industry operated with virtually no oversight, and most working-class Victorians had no idea what they were consuming, only that it dulled the hunger and made the coughing stop, if only for a few hours. Gin was the real demon, sold in shops the size of closets and sipped from battered tin cups. It was stronger, cheaper, and twice as deadly. Mothers poured it down their infants' throats to quiet them. Fathers drank it to forget their failures. Children ran errands for a penny's worth of mother's ruin, sloshing it home in grimy bottles, unaware they were ferrying poison. Some versions were laced with turpentine or sulfuric acid, substances that eroded throats and scalded stomachs. Drunkenness wasn't a vice anymore. It was an anesthetic. Life was too brutal, too cold, too unfair to be experienced sober. For the poor, gin was medicine, warmth, escape. But it came with a price. Rotted livers, burned-out brains, and a descent into madness. Taverns weren't places of cheer and laughter. They were slow-motion graveyards, full of men and women burying themselves, one sip at a time. By nightfall, the public houses filled with coal-dusted laborers, red-eyed widows, and coughing children. Some came for company. Others came because the gin was cheaper than tea. These rooms reeked of sweat, mold, and the sharp sting of ethanol. Singing sometimes broke out, not joyful tunes, but hollow chants meant to push back the dark for just a few minutes more. Outside, the streets shimmered with vomit and urine. Inside, the light was low, the faces were slack, and the drinks were death. In a society where medical care was beyond reach, where hunger was a daily ritual, and where sorrow was the default setting of life, alcohol was the poor man's cure-all. It didn't heal. It simply delayed the pain until the heart failed or the liver gave out. In the Victorian Age, every cup came with a silent wager. Which would go first, your memories or your body? And still, tomorrow you'd drink again. Step inside a well-appointed Victorian parlor and take in the beauty. Emerald wallpaper catching the candlelight, silk curtains draped like theater backdrops, a mother brushing powder onto her cheeks in front of a looking glass. But beneath the surface of all that elegance lies a horror story. That green on the walls? It's arsenic. Not a trace. Pounds of it, baked into pigments like Sheely's green and Paris green, used because they were vibrant and long-lasting. The brighter the room, the deadlier it was. The paper flakes with age, releasing microscopic particles into the air. You breathe them in every night while you sleep. The damp from outside walls reacts with the arsenic, creating a gas that poisons without warning. Babies in cribs grow feverish. Adults suffer headaches and nausea. The house is killing them, and no one suspects the decor. It wasn't just wallpaper. Women painted their faces with lead-based powder to chase that pale, delicate look. They dabbed belladonna in their eyes to widen their pupils. Never mind the eventual blindness. Mercury crept into skin creams. Arsenic was in soaps, tonics, even the flour used for baking when whiteners were needed. Beauty in the Victorian Age was a game of Russian roulette with no winners. The cosmetics market was a toxic free-for-all. No regulations meant no safety, and the very things meant to highlight health and charm slowly eroded flesh, nerves, and sanity. In wealthier homes, refinement came with a hidden cost. In poorer ones, cheap alternatives were sometimes even worse, thrown together with industrial scraps and sold without labels. Even the workers who made these items weren't spared. Young women in matchstick factories developed a condition known as phossy jaw, a rotting of the jawbone from exposure to white phosphorus. Their faces would swell, their teeth fell out, and eventually, the bone itself disintegrated. The air in these workshops was thick with dust that poisoned slowly but relentlessly. No mask, no treatment, just the hope you'd live long enough to marry out of it. Meanwhile, dye workers developed skin diseases, respiratory conditions, and tremors from handling chemical pigments. A simple job in a paint shop or beauty mill could be a death sentence. The cruel irony was that all this poison came packaged as progress. The Victorian Age worshipped appearance, ornate homes, decorative wardrobes, delicate features, and yet, every layer of gloss concealed rot. A beautiful drawing room could sicken an entire family. A touch of rouge could bring on seizures. A hint of perfume might contain benzene or chloroform. To live surrounded by these things wasn't just expensive, it was dangerous. But the public, dazzled by novelty and social pressure, rarely questioned the risk. In a world where survival already teetered on a razor's edge, vanity tipped the scales. And behind the lace and silk, behind the makeup and gilded walls, lay a slow, invisible death that wore a smile. The match factory is warm, almost comforting at first glance, especially compared to the freezing alleys outside. Rows of young girls sit shoulder to shoulder, dipping wooden sticks into a white, waxy substance under flickering gaslight. They chatter, laugh, cough. But beneath that laughter is the slow onset of horror. The substance they're handling, white phosphorus, clings to their fingers, coats their lips, creeps into their bloodstream. There are no gloves, no masks, no ventilation. It's just part of the job. A job they took because there were no other options. Because it was this, or starvation. The symptoms start slowly. A toothache that won't go away. A bit of swelling in the cheek. Then the jaw begins to rot. They call it phossy jaw, but there's nothing quaint about it. The phosphorus eats through flesh and bone, turning faces into gaping wounds. The stench is unbearable, sweet, necrotic, and ever-present. Girls are dismissed as unclean, as if it's their fault, and many are quietly fired before they can become bad for morale. Some hide their illness with scarves or silence. Others are sent to hospitals where there is no cure, only isolation and slow decay. A few have their jaws surgically removed, if they can endure the agony and survive the blood loss. But most simply disappear from the factory floor and are never spoken of again. The match girls are children mostly. Some are as young as 12, already feeding their families. They work 13-hour days in conditions that feel more like a slow-motion execution. Supervisors walk the rows with canes, snapping them against the backs of inattentive necks. There's no time to rest, no room for complaint. And yet, the girls sing. They sing to keep from screaming. They tell jokes to keep from crying. Their fingers turn yellow from the phosphorus. Their skin grows brittle and pale. They don't complain when their teeth fall out. It's just part of the job. But each match they dip is a tick on the clock. Each spark a reminder of the fire eating them from the inside out. This isn't an industrial accident. It's an accepted fact of life. The factory keeps going because the city demands cheap matches, and the poor demand any wage. The newspapers rarely print the stories. The owners blame the girls for poor hygiene, and as long as the profits keep rolling in, the rot stays hidden behind the brick walls of the workhouse. To be a match girl in Victorian London is to live with a countdown in your mouth. You light the world, one box at a time, while your own light is quietly snuffed out. This isn't just poverty, it's systemic sacrifice, a human cost buried under the flicker of every flame. You wake up thirsty, stomach still sour from the dry crust of yesterday's bread. A knock at the door means the milkman has arrived, his tin canisters rattling as he measures out your day's ration. It's white, it's liquid, and it smells. Mostly fine. But in Victorian England, that doesn't mean much. Milk is supposed to nourish, to be gentle, safe. But in this age, milk carries secrets, some dirty, some deadly. To stretch their profits, dishonest dairymen dilute their product with water. Not just clean water, who could afford that? But water scooped from ditches, puddles, or drawn from wells tainted by the very privies built to keep the streets sanitary. You don't know what's in your milk. No one does. Sometimes it's chalk powder to thicken it. Sometimes it's plaster, salt, or even animal brains ground to a slurry to imitate cream. For infants and the ill, milk is a daily essential. That's why it becomes one of the easiest delivery systems for disease. Typhoid, dysentery, tuberculosis. They ride in on the morning milk run, quietly poured into porridge bowls and nursing bottles. The poor don't question the milk's quality. They're lucky to have any at all. And regulations? Few, flimsy, and rarely enforced. The testing of milk was a new science and usually not applied to small vendors. As long as it looked vaguely white and didn't stink, it sold. Even the cows are a hazard. Many live in dark, unventilated urban barns, never grazing a field. They're fed brewery waste and starchy leftovers instead of grass, producing a liquid that's barely recognizable as milk. These cows are often sick, covered in sores, coughing through infected lungs, and yet they're milked daily, their yield mixed and sold without question. The milk isn't boiled or treated. It goes straight from bucket to buyer. For a growing child or a weakened body, one glass can be fatal. Families rarely connect a sick child to the milk he drank. The fevers come suddenly, the vomiting relentless, and by then, it's too late. The milkman is long gone, his coins jingling as he moves on to the next house. Maybe he doesn't know. Maybe he does. But survival doesn't leave room for scruples. In the overcrowded tenements of London and Manchester, milk is a gamble, and one that many lose without ever knowing they placed a bet. You think of milk as purity, as innocence. But in the Victorian Age, it's a weapon hiding in plain sight. Every breakfast might be your last warm meal. Every cup could be your last breath. It's not just the streets or the sewers that are killing people. It's what's on the table. You don't just live in poverty. You are punished for it. In Victorian society, to be poor is to be guilty by default. Not of theft or violence, but of simply existing without means. Hunger isn't a symptom. It's a crime. The poor are branded lazy, immoral, defective. Charity comes with lectures, shame, and strings. Neighbors judge, newspapers sneer, and politicians legislate morality from the comfort of their upholstered chairs. The less you have, the more the law watches you, and it watches not to help, but to accuse. Vagrancy laws mean that just standing still too long can land you in jail. Jobless? That's suspicious. Sick? That's weakness. Homeless? That's your own fault. The system is a trap, and poverty is its bait. Begging for food could mean a whipping. Stealing bread to feed your child might land you in prison or on a ship bound for a penal colony. For the poor, the law is not protection, it is persecution. And if you think you can escape it by working, think again. Many jobs for the impoverished pay too little to live on. Rent eats your wages. Bread devours the rest. You can't save because you earn just enough to keep from collapsing. That's by design. Victorian capitalism is a meat grinder. Cheap labor in, broken bodies out. There are no safety nets. Only the workhouse looms, waiting like a wolf in bureaucratic clothing. The moment you fall ill or miss a day of work, the descent begins. Miss rent once, and you're evicted. End up on the street, and your children are taken. Not to be helped, but to be institutionalized, treated as criminals in training. Society doesn't just ignore the poor, it actively hunts them. Policemen harass them, judges condemn them, landlords bleed them, and when they die, they're buried in mass graves, their names forgotten before the earth settles. Even charity becomes a weapon. Philanthropy is less about relief and more about reform of your soul, your habits, your will. You are expected to be grateful for every crust, every sermon, every condescending glance. If you're not smiling in your suffering, you're doing it wrong. And heaven help you if you dare to ask for more. In this world, being poor is not just hard, it's dangerous. Not because of crime, but because of the law. Because the system is designed not to lift you, but to weigh you down, to keep you quiet, compliant, and invisible. Every breath you take without money is treated like theft. And the worst part? No one thinks it's wrong. Poverty in Victorian England is a curse you're born into, and one society makes sure you never escape. Darkness isn't just a backdrop in Victorian England, it's a weapon. Gaslight flickers weakly on street corners, leaving long stretches of road submerged in a viscous gloom. You can barely see your own hands, let alone what lurks in the alleys. Every fog-choked turn is a risk. This is a city where footsteps behind you mean danger, and silence is worse. Women walk in groups or not at all, because one wrong step off a main road can mean disappearance. The term vanishing becomes normal. Families pin hopes to newspapers, but the pages are filled with other names. Women gone, bodies found, sometimes not even that. The city devours people and never burps. Gas lamps glow like dying eyes above doors and walkways, offering just enough light to make you believe you're safe, until you're not. Shadows aren't empty here. They hold knives, garrotes, and rough hands. The criminal underworld is not underground. It walks beside you. Pickpockets brush your coat, prostitutes vanish, gangs rule alleys, and when the blood flows, there is no guarantee justice follows. Police forces are new, small, and overwhelmed. Detectives are barely more than guesses in tall hats. Most crimes go unsolved. Many are never reported. If you're rich, you lock your doors and hire watchmen. If you're poor, you pray. That's all you can afford. And even prayer is cheap comfort when you know that screams don't always bring help. The fog muffles sound. The cold freezes motion. Violence can unfold feet from your window and remain a mystery. Victorian London is a labyrinth of desperation, and crime slips through its seams like poison through a cracked pipe. Jack the Ripper isn't an outlier. He's the headline of a daily reality. Women killed and mutilated in Whitechapel become cautionary tales, but no one changes the tale. Prostitutes are treated as disposable. Justice limps far behind the blade. Sensational headlines sell papers, but none of them lead to safer streets. Meanwhile, criminals know the odds. They know they won't be caught. They don't need to rush. The darkness gives them cover, and society gives them silence. And even if you're not murdered, the fear itself is enough to do damage. You flinch at every sound, cross the street to avoid your own imagination. Women clutch blades hidden in garters. Men carry clubs disguised as canes. Children memorize escape routes to run from strangers who look too long. This is a city where people vanish like smoke and nothing changes. The street lamps whisper lies of safety, and the night swallows the rest. Victorian England doesn't just let crime happen, It provides it with perfect conditions. The bed creaks under your weight, not from age alone, but from the generations that came before you, sweating, shivering, and dying in the same straw-stuffed mattress. In Victorian homes, especially those of the working poor, furniture was a hand-me-down of hardship. You don't inherit comfort, you inherit infestation. Bedbugs scatter as your body heat seeps into the sheets, and fleas hop from the wooden legs of the bed to your ankles before your second breath. The lice? They never left. They live in the seams of the blankets, waiting for another scalp to conquer. This isn't the kind of heritage celebrated in portraits or family Bibles. This is the real legacy. Parasites passed down from parent to child with the same inevitability as poverty and premature death. You try to sleep, but each twitch is another bite. Every itch might turn into an infection, and the moment you relax, you feel the sharp crawl of something moving through your hair or across your ribs. It's a nightly ritual of scratching, swatting, and bargaining with exhaustion. You don't dream, you endure. Doctors knew little about germ theory in the early Victorian era, and even less about what lived in the shadows of poor homes. Hygiene wasn't neglected out of laziness. It was an impossibility. Soap was expensive. Clean water was often tainted. Your entire household might share one wash tub, and the water would be gray with skin and soil before you got your turn. And then you went right back into a bed that had soaked up years of coughs, sweat, blood, and worse. Mattresses were rarely replaced. Sometimes they were never even cleaned, just flipped when one side became too foul. The bugs didn't just bite, they carried disease. Lice could spread typhus, fleas might bring plague, and bedbugs, while not always deadly, guaranteed open sores and restless nights. The line between your bed and a battlefield was paper thin, and if you had a job to do in the morning, tough luck. Your body might be covered in welts, but the factory bell won't wait. You scratch yourself raw in silence and drag yourself through another day in clothes that carry the same parasites you tried to leave behind. Worse still, this condition wasn't confined to hovels or alley slums. Even modest middle-class homes had their fair share of creepy crawlers. The rich, at least, had the privilege of linen changes and housemaids with boiling kettles. The poor, they had hope. Hope that tonight the bedbugs were full, or that someone else in the house smelled tastier. There's no escape, only temporary distraction. You cover yourself in clothes, pull a scarf over your ears, and lie still, pretending you're not crawling on the inside. This is sleep in the Victorian Age, a gamble against the dark and against everything that lives in it. Dinner arrives not on a plate, but in a cracked bowl or on a board darkened with age and grime. It's barely warm, barely fresh, and barely food. You've worked 12 hours for this. Some stringy meat that may once have mooed a week ago, now gray and dry at the edges, flanked by bread so heavy it could double as a doorstop. The loaf smells faintly of lime because it's been bulked up with powdered chalk. That's not the worst thing in it. Bakers, pressured to stretch their supplies and keep up with demand, cut flour with alum, sawdust, or even plaster. It gives the bread a fine white look and makes it feel filling, at least for a little while. It also scrapes your stomach raw and weakens your bones over time. But you eat it. You have no choice. The meat? If it's meat at all, it might be mystery offcuts ground together. Or worse, meat that's been rotting and chemically freshened for sale. A few hours in a vinegar soak and some coloring can bring a spoiled hunk of flesh back to life, at least enough to fool the eye under gaslight. You chew around the gristle and try not to taste the rot. You hope it's not horse. You hope it's not rat. You hope it's not what made your neighbor sick last week. Hope becomes a staple food. It goes down easier than the stew. Vegetables are rare and usually limp. Cabbage reeks when boiled too long, but that's exactly how it's always served. Carrots are soft and hollow. Potatoes, when you can get them, come with eyes and sometimes worms. There's no real seasoning, unless salt counts, which it barely does, especially when it's fake salt, made with powdered stone or crushed brick. It cuts your tongue and numbs the flavors. That might be a mercy. Clean water is not guaranteed, so you often cook with whatever's on hand. From public pumps laced with sewage to rainwater collected in gutters. Contaminated water means cholera. So many meals end in vomiting, diarrhea, fever. A feast might kill you faster than a famine. You eat fast because it's cold and you're hungry, but also because you can't afford to linger. Someone else in the house is waiting for their turn. There might not be enough for them either. And when the scraps are gone, you scrape the pot. If anything's stuck to the bottom, that's considered a bonus. This isn't dining, it's survival theater. Every bite is a question mark. Your stomach churns not from fullness, but from anxiety. You chew past your better judgment. The meal might get you through the night, or it might be the last thing you ever eat. That's dinner in the Victorian Age. Not a meal, but a quiet dare between you and death. Tightness isn't just a matter of vanity, it's a sentence. The corset, that iconic silhouette of the Victorian woman, is both a fashion statement and a torture device. Beneath lace and silk is a structure of whalebone, steel, and shame. A young girl begins binding her waist before her body has even finished growing. The goal isn't comfort, it's compliance. A proper lady is expected to faint before she's allowed to speak. Her breath should be shallow, her waist narrow, her complaints muffled beneath petticoats and etiquette. The tighter the corset, the more praise she earns. But those compliments come with a price. Her lungs cannot fully expand. Breathing becomes a chore. Ribs shift, organs compress, spines warp. Doctors call it corset liver when the body rearranges itself to fit the shape of society's demands. Women endure migraines, nausea, dizziness, and chronic fatigue. But they keep lacing up, because to loosen a corset is to loosen one's reputation. A loose woman, literally, is scandalous. Corsets were advertised as health aids, believed to improve posture and protect a delicate frame from collapse. In truth, they hasten that collapse. Long-term wear can cause muscle atrophy. The body forgets how to hold itself up. Bones crack more easily. Fertility suffers. Some women miscarry because their bellies cannot swell. Others die from infections caused by internal damage their physicians refuse to attribute to fashion. And then there's the social cage that corsets represent. You can't run in one. You can't bend easily. You can't fight. That's the point. Victorian fashion is designed to restrain. It keeps women dependent, delicate, decorative. A corset says, don't move too quickly, don't speak too loudly, don't need too much. Stay small, stay still. Be pretty, not present. Even women who work, maids, factory girls, seamstresses, wear corsets, though usually cheaper, stiffer ones that dig into their skin and offer no mercy during 16-hour shifts. Their corsets don't come with luxury. They come with sweat and bruises. They wear them not to impress, but to avoid judgment. To be unlaced is to be seen as vulgar, indecent, or poor. The irony is, they are poor. They wear pain to mask poverty. At night, when the corset finally comes off, if it does, the body doesn't celebrate. It sags. The muscles ache, the bones creak. A woman might cough up blood and blame it on the air. She might faint and blame it on nerves. No one blames the corset. It's fashionable, it's feminine, it's killing her, but beautifully. Death by corset isn't always immediate. It's a slow throttling, a daily compromise of breath, blood, and bone in exchange for respectability. To be admired, a Victorian woman must first be disfigured. Your gums are already bleeding by the time you reach for the brush, if you even have one. In the Victorian Age, dental hygiene is less a ritual and more a punishment. The brush isn't soft. It's a rough bristled stick, sometimes made with horsehair, pig bristles, or wire. Whatever can be glued to a wooden handle. Toothpaste? A mixture of brick dust, crushed eggshells, salt, or soot. If you're lucky, there might be a hint of mint. If you're not, there's ash and bone. The goal is abrasion, not care. You scrub until your mouth bleeds because you think that's how you get clean. Children grow up fearing the toothbrush more than the belt. It hurts, but not as much as a rotten molar. When your teeth do go bad, and they will, it's not a matter of seeing a dentist. That title barely exists. You'll visit a barber, a blacksmith, or anyone with a steady hand and a set of pliers. There's no anesthesia. You grip the chair or bite down on leather. One good yank, maybe two, and the tooth is out, along with a few splinters of jaw if your luck's sour. Infection is a gamble. Some people die from dental abscesses. Others survive, but with cheeks permanently swollen or mouths warped from botched extractions. There are no antiseptics, no numbing agents, no follow-ups. For those who can afford it, there are dentures. These aren't modern marvels of porcelain and resin. They're human teeth, real ones, sometimes scavenged from battlefields or stolen from corpses. They're jammed into ivory or wood, shaped roughly to fit. They don't sit comfortably. They click when you talk. They smell. But they're a sign of class. Missing teeth are for beggars. Pain is for the poor. Some use concoctions to numb the pain. Laudanum, gin, even chloroform if they can find it. But none of it guarantees relief. Many simply live with the agony. An infected tooth means sleepless nights, fever dreams, and prayers that the swelling goes down rather than up toward the brain. Once the rot sets in, it spreads fast. There's no prevention. Sugar is rare for the poor, but bread and beer are constant, and both are acidic. Food gets stuck in your molars, but floss doesn't exist. Mouthwash is a superstition. Most people walk around with blackened teeth, stinking breath, and swollen faces. They learn to talk without showing their mouths. Children lose baby teeth in a mix of blood and panic. Adults dread every twinge, every sensitivity to cold, every pulse of heat in the jaw. It's not a cavity, it's a countdown. When it's finally unbearable, you go to the man with the iron grip and pray he's drunk enough to be numb himself. He'll do the job fast. Maybe. To smile in the Victorian Age isn't a sign of joy. It's a show of defiance, a brief moment of bravery from someone whose mouth is a battlefield. You want to look beautiful, but in the Victorian Age, beauty is slow suicide. Every morning begins with a ritual that could kill you. You dab cream under your eyes, whiten your face, rouge your cheeks, and darken your hair. It's all part of being presentable. But what you're really doing is layering poison onto your skin. Victorian cosmetics are laced with death, packaged in glass jars, with elegant labels that hide their true ingredients: lead, mercury, arsenic, and ammonia. The face cream that makes your skin pale and flawless is laced with white lead. It dries you out, cracks your skin, and seeps into your blood. Over time, your gums turn black, your hair falls out, your muscles weaken. But in the mirror, you see a porcelain complexion. You look alive. That's all that matters. Mercury is used to erase blemishes. It also erodes your kidneys and destabilizes your mind. Prolonged exposure leads to tremors, hallucinations, and madness. But if it means fewer spots, clearer skin, and a fashionable glow, women endure it. Some don't even know the source of their symptoms. They just think they're frail or hysterical. The doctors agree. No one suspects it's the beauty routine that's rotting them from the inside. Hair dye is another killer. Graying is a social death sentence for women, so they reach for the lead-based black dye, rubbing it into their scalps week after week. The lead accumulates. It makes them tired, dizzy, confused. Eventually, it shuts down their organs. Men are no safer. They oil their mustaches with concoctions that contain sulfur and ammonia, breathing in toxins every time they groom. Perfumes are made with alcohols and essential oils that irritate the skin. Lipsticks in shades of crimson and rose are thickened with crushed insects and colored with carmine, a dye that causes allergic reactions. Nail polish doesn't exist yet, but some women stain their nails with sulfurous pastes or wear gloves lined with arsenic to soften their hands. And all of it is applied with bare fingers. There's no hygiene, no sanitized brushes or clean cotton swabs. Cosmetics are shared, stored poorly, and applied over grime. Infections are constant. Skin diseases fester beneath layers of white powder and rouge. No one talks about it, though. Beauty demands sacrifice. Even soap isn't safe. Cheaper soaps are made with harsh alkalis that burn the skin. They strip away natural oils and leave rashes. The more delicate varieties are expensive, scented with chemicals that induce headaches or nausea. Yet cleanliness is considered moral. To be dirty is to be sinful. Looking good isn't just a habit. It's a weapon, a form of social armor in a society that judges you for every blemish. But it's a weapon that turns on its wielder. In Victorian times, vanity isn't just a sin, it's a sentence. Every mirror reflects not just your face, but your fate, and no one escapes it untouched. Death in Victorian Britain is not a rare tragedy. It's a daily ritual. You can't walk a block without passing a black-draped window or a child in funeral whites. Mourning is not just emotional. It's performative, exhaustive, and expensive. Entire industries are built around grief. Coffin makers, mourning dress shops, professional wailers, photographers who capture the dead in stiff, eerie portraits. All thrive in a culture where dying is constant and remembrance is codified. If someone dies in your family, and odds are they will, you're expected to follow a strict schedule of sorrow. Black clothing, black jewelry, black veils. The longer your mourning period, the more respectable your grief. A widow might wear black for 2 full years. Children wear armbands. Even servants are dressed down in accordance with the master's mourning. You are graded on your public display of sadness. But not everyone can afford the full ritual. The poor improvise. Coffins are sometimes rented and reused. Bodies slid out before burial to save wood. Second-hand mourning clothes are sold in street markets. Some families wrap the dead in old curtains or newspaper and bury them quietly at night to avoid scandal. If you can't pay for burial, your loved one may be dissected by medical students or carted off to a mass grave. Dying poor is just as degrading as living poor. Funeral processions clog narrow streets. Hearses pulled by horses with black plumes pass rows of bystanders in silent recognition. These spectacles are equal parts ceremony and advertisement, proof that even in death, you had value. Or at least, you wanted people to think you did. Grief becomes a kind of social competition. Who had the grandest coffin, the longest procession, the most mourners in black silk? Even the home of the dead becomes a theater. Clocks are stopped, mirrors are covered, curtains drawn, all to mark the departure of a soul. And yet, the house continues to breathe death. The smell of illness, the echo of coughing fits, the quiet absence that follows. Mourning bleeds into every corner of domestic life. For those in the death trade, it's a golden age. Undertakers offer full mourning packages. Photographers pose corpses with open eyes, painted on closed lids, to create the illusion of life. Jewelry is fashioned from the hair of the deceased, worn as brooches or lockets. Children are dressed in white and laid in tiny coffins, adorned like sleeping cherubs for the last family photo. Every day is shadowed by the Black Parade. The poor die quietly and quickly. The rich die with ceremony. But no one dies cleanly. Disease, injury, childbirth, starvation, all feed a system that turns grief into spectacle. In the Victorian Age, you don't just fear death. You plan for it. You budget for it. You wear it. And when it comes, it's not a surprise. It's expected. A part of the rhythm of life. The fog that swallows London is no misty dream. It's a chemical curse. This isn't a gentle veil drifting across cobblestones. It's an oily, choking mass of soot and filth, thick enough to blot out the sun and smother lungs. Victorians called it pea soup, but it wasn't something you'd ever want to taste. It crept low to the ground and high into chimneys, curling into your bed sheets, your soup pot, and your lungs. When you walk outside, the air wraps around your face like wet wool soaked in ash. You taste coal on your tongue, and your breath feels like you've swallowed chimney dust. It wasn't just coal smoke rising from the countless chimneys, though that was bad enough. It was human waste from open sewers, industrial chemicals from dye works and tanneries, and the putrid stink of dead animals left to rot in alleyways. Everything the city tried to hide found its way into the air, and you couldn't avoid it. The fog drifted into homes through cracks in windows and under doors. It smothered schoolyards, market stalls, and tenement blocks alike. Whether you were rich or poor, you breathed it in. The difference was only in whether you could escape to the countryside when it got unbearable. Sometimes, the fog grew so dense that people couldn't see their own hands in front of their faces. Carriages collided. Pedestrians wandered into the Thames. Thieves and murderers took cover in the yellow haze. It wasn't just hard to see, it was hard to survive. People with asthma or weak lungs stayed inside, clutching handkerchiefs to their mouths. But even inside, there was no clean air. The same coal that powered the factories also heated homes. Every fireplace in every room spewed more soot into the already poisoned sky. And still, people kept burning. Coal was cheap. It was survival. If you didn't light the fire, you froze. If you did, you helped poison the city. It was a lose-lose game, and Londoners played it daily. Children suffered the most. Their lungs couldn't handle the assault. Coughs became chronic. Skin grew pale. Eyes watered and stung. The fog became a living thing, something you cursed, feared, and endured. Newspapers tried to downplay it. Doctors warned about it. Poets romanticized it. But everyone knew. The fog was death. Silent, drifting, and patient. In the Victorian Age, nature wasn't the enemy. Industry was. And the fog that blanketed London wasn't a fluke of weather. It was the bill come due for progress. A city choked by its own success. A warning with every breath. You hear the whistle before you see the danger. A shrill, desperate sound slicing through the night, meant to summon help, but more often, it signals that help won't arrive in time. Victorian policing is barely more than a suggestion. The streets are patrolled by a scattered handful of underpaid, undertrained men in long coats and stiff hats, armed with little more than truncheons and good intentions. They walk beats in twos, if they're lucky, trying to tame a city that grows faster than law can follow. And the city is restless. Violence is not an exception, it's the backdrop. Alleyways hum with danger. Gangs of desperate boys and embittered men roam like wolves, ready to pounce on the isolated or weak. Pickpockets thrive in crowds. Thieves work in daylight. Women are dragged into the shadows and never seen again. The law can't stop it because the law barely sees it. By the time the whistle blows, the blood is already drying on the stones. If you're attacked, your best defense is your scream, your speed, or a neighbor bold enough to intervene. There are no emergency numbers, no radios, just the long hope that someone hears, and the longer wait for someone to care. The night belongs to those willing to hurt others, to survive. And if you carry anything of value, a coin, a parcel, your virtue, you're already a target. Even the wealthy aren't safe. Carriages are robbed, houses are burgled, guards can be bribed or intimidated. And the police? They're often corrupt, easily bought by the same people they're meant to arrest. Crime isn't just a risk, it's a living system, a second economy that thrives in dark corners and crowded slums. Justice comes late, if at all. Most people learn not to expect it. And yet, you keep walking, because there's no other choice. You pull your coat tighter, listen for footsteps behind you, and keep to the gaslight's dim halo. You might carry a blade, or a sharpened key. Maybe you grip a heavy book in your coat pocket, ready to swing. But even with your guard up, you feel the city's eyes on you. Hungry, tired, waiting. In the Victorian Age, the concept of safety is a fantasy sold in novels and whispered in parlors. On the streets, the truth is simple and brutal. You are vulnerable. You are alone. And the whistle isn't a promise, it's a warning. You're 7 years old, maybe 8 if you're lucky. The world outside is gray and wet, but inside the chimney, it's pitch black and choking. You wake before dawn in a room you share with 10 other boys. Your bones sore from the previous day's climb. There's no breakfast, just orders barked by the master sweep. You're small, and that makes you valuable, because only children can wriggle into the narrow flues of London's labyrinthine houses. The wealthy want clean chimneys. The law says nothing about how they're cleaned. So, up you go. The soot clings to your skin and burns your eyes. You can't see, but you can feel every jagged brick scraping your arms, your knees, your back. Sometimes the chimneys curve or narrow unexpectedly. Sometimes they're still hot. You cough, black, wet hacking that rattles your ribs, but there's no room to turn around. You climb by feel and instinct, pushing upward until you find the light, or until your strength gives out. Children get stuck. It happens often. Their cries echo into bedrooms until they fall silent. Some are pulled out with ropes. Some aren't pulled out at all. They're left, and the chimney gets bricked over. No one holds a funeral for a sweep's apprentice. You're lucky if someone remembers your name. And if you survive the day, you get a crust of bread and a bed of straw. Your body becomes a roadmap of bruises and burns. You might develop chimney sweep's carcinoma, a cancer from all the soot rubbing into your skin. No one knows why it happens. No one cares. You are a disposable tool, cheaper than proper brushes, and far more flexible. Sometimes, the master sweep uses a torch to encourage the climb, lighting straw at the bottom to force a reluctant child upward. The flue becomes an oven, and you scramble like a rat in a pipe, your hands blistering against the heat. You scream, but it only brings laughter. You're not a boy to them. You're a body, a shape that fits where no adult can reach. The worst part? This was considered normal. It was legal. It was praised as character building. Lords and ladies dined comfortably while children died slowly in their chimneys, and no one questioned it, until much later, when the damage had already been done. Reform came, but not fast enough for you. By evening, you're back in your corner, coughing up soot and shivering in the cold. You sleep light because you know you'll be climbing again tomorrow. In the Victorian Age, childhood wasn't innocence. It was labor. It was fear. And for chimney boys, it was hell with brick walls. Pain is universal, but comfort is not. In the Victorian Age, suffering is a spectacle reserved for the poor and a private indulgence for the wealthy. If you're fortunate enough to be born into money, your ailments are draped in velvet and treated with privacy, hushed voices, and soft linens. Your doctor arrives at your home, and though he might bleed you with leeches or offer opiates laced with ignorance, at least you suffer behind closed doors. You moan into feather pillows. Your illness is considered tragic, romantic even, a delicate constitution, a mysterious malady. For the poor, pain is not poetry. It's public property. You cry out in a shared tenement room where two families sleep in shifts, or you writhe on the workhouse floor, your screams mingling with others, too sick to move. There's no dignity in it. There's no space for it. Privacy is a currency you never owned, and comfort is something you only glimpse in the windows of the houses you clean. If your bones snap, they stay snapped. If your fever spikes, you sweat it out under a damp rag in a cot that smells of every infection imaginable. Pain is a background hum in the life of the poor, so constant that people learn not to hear it. There are no sick days. If you're injured, you work. If you can't work, you starve. There is no rest, no recuperation. The rich have convalescence. The poor have consequences. Children cry in corners with untreated burns. Mothers give birth in cellars. Old men die sitting up because there's nowhere else to go. There are no morphine drips, no bandages wrapped with care, just rags and rust. If you faint, you're kicked awake. If you scream, you're told to be quiet. Pain for the poor is not a condition. It's a character flaw. Worse still, pain becomes suspect. If you limp, you're lazy. If you beg, you're a fraud. The system doesn't protect the injured. It punishes them. Hospitals are few and often refuse the destitute. And if you are admitted, the risk of infection is so high you might leave in a box. There is no gentle lighting, no reassuring hands. Just the sharp edge of a dirty scalpel and the indifference of men who see your suffering every day and have stopped caring. They call it triage. You call it terror. And should you speak of your pain, should you ask for relief, you're labeled weak, dramatic, or dangerous. The rich might be doted on when they cry, but the poor are mocked. Your suffering is not a story worth telling. It's an inconvenience, an embarrassment, an inevitability. In Victorian society, you don't get to grieve aloud. You don't get to scream into silken handkerchiefs. You grit your teeth, because the truth is simple and cruel. Even agony has class boundaries. You're 9 months into agony. There's no prenatal care, just whispered advice and superstition. Your body has stretched and swelled without rest, without relief, and now labor begins. The pain is immediate, merciless, and there is no comfort coming. You lie on blood-stained sheets in a cramped, poorly lit room, surrounded by women who've seen this before, but can do little more than hold your hand and mop your brow. If you're lucky, a midwife attends, a seasoned woman with experience, instincts, and no formal medical training. If you're unlucky, A man in a waistcoat shows up wielding forceps and an inflated sense of confidence. The truth is, Victorian medicine doesn't know much about childbirth, except that women die from it often. The doctors who do attend births are trained in theory, not empathy, and rarely wash their hands between procedures. They've come from dissecting cadavers or treating open wounds and go straight to your womb, introducing infections you have no defense against. Puerperal fever, or childbed fever, is a death sentence, and the bacteria that causes it spreads like a curse from hospital to hospital, home to home, womb to womb. There are no epidurals, no antibiotics, no emergency cesareans. If the baby is breech, the doctor might try to turn it by hand. If labor stalls, you'll be told to push harder, to stop complaining, to think of your husband. Hours pass. You scream yourself hoarse. And if the baby survives, there's no guarantee you will. Hemorrhage, rupture, infection. Each is more likely than a safe delivery. You are not protected by wealth, though it helps. Queens and paupers alike bleed into the sheets, but the poor bleed in silence, in slums, and their bodies are buried without ceremony. Even after the child is born, the danger doesn't end. Your body is torn, exhausted, vulnerable. You're expected to breastfeed immediately, to get up and resume life as if nothing happened. There's no rest, no recuperation. You might be back at work in days, laundering other people's sheets while bleeding into your own. And if your baby dies, as many do, there is no counseling, no comfort. Just a hole in the ground and another pregnancy waiting in the wings. Childbirth in the Victorian era is not a miracle. It's a gamble with the highest stakes. Every woman walks into labor knowing she might not walk out, and no one will call it a tragedy. They'll say it was God's will, or fate, or just the way things are. Your death will be noted in a church record, perhaps mourned by a few, and quickly forgotten by the world that demanded your sacrifice. In this age, bringing life into the world is one of the surest ways to lose your own. You don't choose this life. You're pushed into it, by hunger, by eviction, by the steady erosion of choices, until there's nothing left but the street and your body. In Victorian Britain, sex work is not scandal, it's routine. There are thousands of women walking the cobbled alleys of London every night, sleeves rolled high, faces painted cheap, eyes darting between gaslight shadows. You're one of them now. A girl with a name, perhaps once a family, now a whisper in the fog. A commodity sold hourly. A survivalist in a war no one acknowledges. The men who find you don't see you. They see a function, a need met, a secret sin tucked into a pocket of anonymity. Some are polite, some are cruel. Some pay in coins, others pay in fists. But all of them carry risk. Disease is everywhere, and it wears no visible face. Gonorrhea and syphilis spread like wildfire, and there's no real cure. Mercury treatments are as deadly as the illness itself, and they leave you shaking, drooling, and eventually mad. You cough blood and rot from the inside, your joints swollen, your skin pocked and pale. Still, you go back to work, because you have to. The brothels are no safer. Madam takes a cut. Policemen take favors. There's no protection, no rights, and no appeal if something goes wrong. You are both product and waste, used and discarded. If you get pregnant, you risk losing your place. If you seek an abortion, you risk death. If you carry to term, the baby may starve before you can find more work. Every path forward circles back to the same dim alley, the same cracked lips, the same creaking bed. Morality doesn't protect you. It judges you. The same society that exploits your labor will condemn you in the same breath. Religious tracts call you a sinner. Doctors classify you as a vector. Lawmakers call you a threat to public hygiene. You're not a victim, you're a cautionary tale. Even the charities that offer reform want to erase you, not help you. They cut your hair, bleach your clothes, and pray the sin out of you until you vanish into a laundry house or die in penance. And if you're murdered, which happens often, your death won't make headlines. You'll be found in a ditch, or not at all. Maybe a constable will shrug. Maybe someone will blame the djinn. But most will say nothing, because girls like you come and go. They disappear in the fog like smoke off a dying match. In the Victorian Age, sex work is not about lust. It's about need. It's about surviving one more night, feeding one more mouth, staying out of the workhouse. But the cost is always the same: a piece of yourself, gone forever. You don't walk the streets for pleasure. You do it because nothing else remains. And every client might be the last face you ever see. Every home is a tinderbox, and you're living inside it. Victorian houses aren't built for safety. They're built fast, cheap, and close together. Wood beams soaked with age, chimneys choked with soot, curtains brushing open flames, floors soaked in paraffin from cleaning. Every candle, every gas lamp, every coal grate is a potential funeral waiting to happen. There are no fire escapes, no alarms, no emergency exits. If the blaze starts at night, and it usually does, you might not even wake up in time to scream. You sleep beside an open flame because there's no other source of light. The wind slips through cracked panes and nudges the candle just enough to kiss the edge of the drapes. A warm glow becomes a flickering horror. The smoke chokes first, thick, oily, black. It seeps under door frames and steals your breath before the fire even reaches you. By the time you open your eyes, the hallway is gone. Flames crawl like insects across the walls. You run, but the stairs are wood too, and they're already burning. Chimney fires are common. Ash builds up like kindling inside the flue, especially in homes where chimney sweeps were too expensive, or, more often, too cruelly neglected. A single spark travels upward, explodes in the throat of the house, and rains fire back down through the hearth. Roofs collapse inward. Neighbors wake to screams and do nothing, because the same thing might happen to them tomorrow. Fire brigades exist, but they are slow, under-equipped, and often charge a fee. If you can't pay, they don't stop. And even if you survive the fire, you might not survive the night. Burns fester. There are no antibiotics. Doctors don't understand sepsis. Skin grafts are unheard of. A child rescued from the flames will likely die within days. Adults fare no better. And should you escape unharmed, you still lose everything: clothing, keepsakes, shelter. Insurance? That's for the wealthy. The poor rebuild with scraps, often on the same scorched plot, because there's nowhere else to go. It's not just homes either. Factories burst into flames with terrifying regularity. Schools, shops, orphanages, all lit by gas, all flanked by wood. Children locked inside to keep them safe become kindling. No regulations, no safety drills. Fire is treated like weather, unpredictable, inevitable, and unworthy of prevention. You don't fear fire like a natural element. You fear it like a neighbor with a grudge. It stalks in silence, waits for carelessness, and punishes the poor. Every flicker of a flame is a coin flip. Will it warm you or consume you? In Victorian life, your house is never just a home. It's a box of matches wrapped in paper, and every night you light a candle, you pray the wind doesn't blow. You're 6 years old, and you don't remember the sound of your mother's voice. You don't remember the warmth of a bed that was truly yours, or the comfort of someone brushing the dirt from your cheeks because they cared. What you do remember is the stone wall of the orphanage, the one you were left at, or dragged into, or born behind. You remember the iron gate that slammed shut, the stern matron's face, and the realization that no one is coming back for you. This is not a place for healing. It's a warehouse for unwanted children, and you are inventory. Orphanages in the Victorian Age are not designed with childhood in mind. They are holding pens, factories of discipline, and sometimes even death. The air is thick with ammonia, mildew, and the sharp, sour smell of too many bodies, packed into too little space. You sleep 6 to a bed, on straw that hasn't been changed in weeks. You wear the same threadbare clothes until they rot off you. There's no privacy, no affection, only routine and reprimand. Wake, scrub, line up, eat if there's food, work if there's work, pray, sleep, repeat. The adults here don't hug you. They don't ask about your dreams or comfort you when you cry. Many were orphans themselves, hardened by the system they now enforce. Punishment is the only language they speak fluently. A missed chore earns a slap. A question gets silence. Talking back earns the cane. Some children vanish in the night, and no one asks where they've gone. Some are sent to other homes or sold into labor. Some are simply buried without a name. You're told this is charity. You're told this is your second chance. But the only lessons you learn are how to flinch before the strike, how to fake prayers you don't believe in, and how to trust no one. The church oversees many of these places, preaching salvation while doling out punishment. You are not a child to them. You are a soul to be corrected, a burden to be managed. On rare occasions, inspectors visit. Everything is cleaned up just enough to pass. A fresh coat of whitewash on the walls, clean collars on the children. They ask if you're well. You nod, because you've learned what happens when you say otherwise. The moment they leave, the lashes return. Some children run, most are caught. The streets are worse in their own way, but at least you choose your suffering there. In the orphanage, there is no choice. You are a ghost in training, learning how to vanish from the world before it ever learns your name. Love is not something you expect anymore. You've seen too many younger ones cry themselves to sleep, asking for mothers who never come. You don't cry. You don't ask. You survive. That's all the orphanage ever wanted from you, and even that feels like asking too much. You take the job because there's nothing else. No one dreams of working in a bone factory, but dreams are a luxury you lost a long time ago. The foreman doesn't care about your age, your hunger, or your health. He only cares that your hands still work, and so you show up, small, cold, and desperate, ready to spend your days surrounded by death. The factory reeks of rot, not the sharp, fleeting kind, but a thick, cloying odor that settles into your hair, your skin, your breath. You'll never be clean again. Bone factories in the Victorian Age are not tidy industrial marvels. They are damp, dark, disease-ridden warehouses where animal remains are boiled, crushed, and ground down into fertilizer, buttons, glue, and combs. Piles of bones arrive daily, carted in from slaughterhouses or picked clean by street scavengers. Some still have flesh clinging to them, buzzing with flies. Rats scurry freely, fat on refuse. The floors are always wet, not with water, but with a slick mix of fat, blood, and decay. Your job might be to haul bones to the grinders or to stir vats of steaming, bubbling muck. You might be tasked with breaking bones down by hand, wielding a hammer until your fingers blister and your muscles scream. Gloves? There are none. Protection? Don't ask. If a sharp edge cuts your skin, you keep working. If infection sets in, you wrap it in cloth and pray. No one has time for weakness here. Every breath you take brings in the smell of boiled marrow, rancid fat, and sour ammonia. The odor clings to you long after your shift ends. You go home with it. You sleep with it. It fills your nose so completely that you stop noticing it until someone else flinches when you pass. Even your sweat smells like death. Some workers stop trying to wash it off. What's the point? The heat is unbearable in summer. In winter, the cold makes the rot somehow worse. Steam rises in clouds from the boiling vats, mixing with the freezing air to coat everything in a foul, greasy condensation. You slip, you fall, you get up again. If you stop moving, you're scolded. If you collapse, you're dragged out and replaced. There are no lunch breaks. You eat surrounded by stink, your food tasting faintly of bones, no matter what it is. Your hands are never clean. Your nails are never clear. You start to forget what normal smells like, what fresh air feels like. You joke about it with the others. If you don't, you cry. There's no dignity here, no upward path, just another day of rot and ruin. You go in, you endure, you go home half dead, and when the sickness comes, as it always does, there's no one to help. The job consumes you slowly. By the time you realize how much it's taken, there's nothing left to save. You step into the street and immediately regret it. The ground is wet, but it hasn't rained. This isn't water. It's a soup of human waste, dead rats, rotting vegetables, and whatever leaked from the tannery up the road. You're barefoot, of course. Almost everyone in your slum is. Shoes are stitched for the rich. For the poor, feet are just another part of the body that's expected to bleed, blister, and bear the weight of survival. You walk anyway, because you have to. You have no choice. The streets of Victorian slums aren't streets in the modern sense. They're more like trenches, narrow, sun-starved corridors pressed between sagging tenements. Every step risks infection. Broken glass from shattered bottles crunches beneath your heel. Rusty nails poke from discarded wood. Bits of coal, cracked brick, and animal bones lie half buried in the sludge. And yet, barefoot is the norm. If you owned shoes once, they're long gone, sold, stolen, or worn down until they split open like everything else in your life. Children dart past you, dodging puddles that could swallow a foot whole. Their souls are hardened from years of exposure, but not immune. Tetanus waits in the shadows. So does gangrene. Step on the wrong thing, and that's your week, or your life, ruined. But you keep moving. You walk to work, to fetch water, to scavenge coal dust from the gutters. Standing still in the slums is worse than walking barefoot. You become part of the landscape, another lump in the mud. Shoemakers exist, but they're for the middle class. Cobblers won't waste their time patching scraps for a shilling, and even if they did, leather costs more than bread. No one eats shoes, so shoes aren't a priority. Rags wrapped around feet are common. Some people tie bits of sacking with string or wire. But rags don't stop the cold, the sharp edges, or the rot. You see people with toes missing, with limps they never recover from, all from one unlucky step. The smell is constant. It clings to your skin, rising in waves as you walk. People relieve themselves in alleys, in doorways, in buckets that get flung out of windows. You don't look up, unless you want a surprise. It's dangerous to be barefoot, but it's also dangerous to be distracted. You walk with eyes down, heart racing, hoping nothing slices you open today. And still, you get used to it. Not because it gets easier, but because there's no other option. You walk barefoot because it's what everyone around you does. You stop dreaming of boots. You stop dreaming altogether. The sharp edge underfoot isn't just glass, it's a reminder. In the Victorian slum, even your feet are considered disposable. The job doesn't come with a uniform or a title worth bragging about, but it does come with a sack, a stick, and a whole lot of screaming. You're the rat catcher's apprentice, if you can call being dragged through alleys by a half-mad man with missing fingers an apprenticeship. Rats are everywhere in the Victorian city, in walls, under floors, crawling over sleeping children and gnawing on corpses in the gutters. They are the true citizens of the age, and you are one of the few brave or desperate enough to fight them. Your workday starts at dawn, and sometimes never ends. You follow your master into cellars and sewers, armed with nothing but a blunted stick and a burlap sack. He knows the places to look: under bakeries, behind hospitals, beneath butcher shops where blood pools in the cracks. He talks to the rats like they're old enemies. Sometimes he sings to them. Sometimes he curses them in a language that might not be English anymore. You mostly keep quiet and try not to vomit. The pay is meager, usually pennies, sometimes a crust of bread from a grateful housewife, sometimes nothing but a good lad and a kick up the backside. But the real price isn't measured in coins. It's the fleas that ride you home and bite you in your sleep. It's the scratches you get on your arms that might fester into infections. It's the day you reach into a crate and feel teeth instead of fur. Rat bites can swell, turn black, and end you in a week. There are poisons, but they're expensive and often ineffective. Rats are clever. They sense traps. They eat around poison. You learn quickly that speed and brute force matter more than any tool. Your master teaches you how to kill them with a club, how to chase them with dogs, how to drown them in buckets. Sometimes you catch them alive to sell them for blood sport. Rat baiting is a popular pastime, and people pay to watch terriers tear rodents apart by the dozen. You stop flinching after a while. The squeals, the blood, the occasional half-tail twitching in your bag, it all becomes part of the job. You learn to distinguish between the harmless brown rats and the larger, more vicious black rats. You develop a sense for where they nest. You stop being scared, mostly, but you never stop being watched. The rats seem to know you, and when you lie awake at night, itching and sweating, you sometimes hear them in the walls, waiting. Becoming a rat catcher isn't a dream job. It's a nightmare that pays just enough to keep you from starving. And yet, in a world where every path leads through misery, vermin control is one of the few steady careers available to a child with no options. It's dirty, dangerous, and dehumanizing. But someone has to do it. And today, it's you. You lace up your corset, fasten the stays, and step into the beautiful cage called crinoline. It's wide, dramatic, and impossibly impractical, a skeletal hoop of fabric and metal meant to elevate your silhouette. But it also turns your body into a wick. The fashion of the Victorian era demands spectacle, even if it means risking your life. You move through parlors and ballrooms like a floating chandelier, the sheer volume of your dress sweeping objects off tables and dragging across open flames. One wrong turn near a hearth or candle, and your elegance becomes an inferno. It happens more often than anyone wants to admit. A woman reaches too close to the fireplace while entertaining guests. A skirt brushes against a candelabra in a crowded hall. In an instant, the gauzy muslin and flammable starches ignite, and the crinoline acts like a cage to keep the flames inside. You can't easily drop and roll. Your limbs are tangled in fabric and steel. Help arrives slowly, confused by the volume and screams. By the time the fire is out, there's not much of you left. And if you survive, you're scarred in ways the fashion magazines never mention. There's no warning label on a gown, no pamphlet handed out at the dressmakers. Fireproofing is a fantasy. Your safety is your own burden, and in a world lit by gas and candles, that burden grows heavier with every step you take. Even lighting a pipe near a woman in full crinoline can spell disaster. It's not just parties or parlors. Factory workers in cotton dresses burn when sparks fly. Children in nightgowns catch flame from oil lamps. Fire has no sense of occasion. Society, of course, blames the victim. She must have been careless. She should have been more cautious. Meanwhile, the fashion industry continues to churn out dresses wide enough to trap heat and sharp enough to injure others if spun too fast. The larger the skirt, the higher your social rank, or at least that's the illusion. But in truth, those dresses often mark the line between opulence and oblivion. There's no glamour in dying screaming, no elegance in smoke-blackened lungs, and yet women still wear them. Because to refuse is to fall behind. To wear simpler clothes is to admit poverty, to be labeled coarse or masculine. Fashion isn't just a trap for the body. It's a prison for the soul, enforced by expectation and reinforced by fear. You don't dress for comfort. You dress for judgment. You dress to compete. You dress because not dressing like this means disappearing socially altogether. Tonight, your gown sweeps across the floor like a tide. The music plays. The candles flicker. You catch someone's eye across the room, and you forget, for just a moment, how flammable you are. That's how it always begins. And sometimes, that's how it ends. You wake before dawn, long before the family upstairs even stirs. The coals must be raked, the fires lit, the water boiled, and the floors scrubbed. You move quietly, efficiently, because your presence must never interrupt the illusion of effortless gentility. You are a servant, part of the grand machinery of the Victorian household, indispensable but unseen. You may work in a house of fine wallpaper, gilded frames, and polished silver, but none of it belongs to you. You sleep in a narrow attic bed, eat crusts in the scullery, and refer to your employers only as sir and ma'am, even if you've scrubbed their underthings since they were children. The rules are ironclad. You use the back stairs. You speak only when spoken to. You never sit in front of your betters, and if you do, by mistake or exhaustion, you may find yourself without a position by morning. Your hours are endless. 16-hour shifts are the norm, and your day doesn't end until the last candle is extinguished and the last dish dried. You are cook, nurse, confidant, maid, and janitor, each role demanding, none of them truly acknowledged. When guests arrive, you vanish. When the dog vomits, you reappear. Downstairs is another world entirely, hot, loud, and reeking of boiled starch and wet coal. It's where gossip festers, tempers flare, and backs give out. The kitchen girl is 12 and already losing her hearing from the clatter. The footman has a permanent limp from years of standing still. The butler pretends dignity, but he's 3 paydays from ruin. This is where lives wear thin. Upstairs, they sip tea and discuss novels. Downstairs, you bleed into the carpet you're told to keep spotless. There's no privacy, no time to dream. You rise and collapse in the same gray rhythm every day, your own life shrinking until it barely exists outside of commands and curtsies. And yet, losing your position is a death sentence. Without a reference, you're nothing. Without a job, you're one missed paycheck from the workhouse. You endure because you must. You smile because it's required. And even then, you're lucky if they remember your name after 5 years. Sometimes you hear them talking through the floorboards about politics, marriage, theater. Their lives are padded with freedom. Yours is built from exhaustion. You may never set foot in the drawing room, but you know its furniture by the feel of dusting it. You know the sound of their baby's cry before they do. You know every weakness in the house, but your own needs are invisible. Servants are the lifeblood of Victorian luxury, and like blood, they're expected to flow quietly and stay out of sight. Upstairs, they dance. Downstairs, you toil. And the staircase between you isn't just wood and carpet. It's a wall that won't break, no matter how hard or how long you climb. You grip the slimy bar with stiff fingers, already cracked from cold water and raw labor. It smells faintly of something between tallow and ash, because that's exactly what it is. Soap in the Victorian Age is less a product of cleanliness and more a weapon of necessity. It's made of lye and animal fat, boiled down in crude vats and sold in rough hunks that feel like stone. There are no comforting scents of lavender or mint, no gentle foams. This isn't hygiene, it's punishment disguised as cleanliness. When you scrub your skin, it stings. The lye bites at any open cut or raw patch, which you inevitably have. It doesn't wash away the grime so much as it burns through it, taking your top layer of skin with it. The poor have no choice. Water is cold, sometimes frozen, and soap is rare enough to be shared between an entire household. If you're lucky, you bathe once a week. If you're not, you simply wipe yourself with a damp rag and hope the lice go dormant in the chill. Cleanliness is both a virtue and an illusion. In the wealthier homes, perfumed powders and floral waters mask the filth. But for the working class, cleanliness is a painful ritual. You scrub until your skin shines red, then wrap yourself in the same clothes that haven't seen a wash in weeks. Under your nails, soot is permanent. Behind your ears, grease gathers no matter how often you scald your skin. And yet, to appear unclean is to be judged by employers, by neighbors, by society itself. Dirt is equated with moral failure, even though escaping it is a near impossibility. Children cry when bathed, not from fear of water, but from the burn of the soap. Mothers rub their babies clean with rags and lye, wincing at each red welt. Your skin becomes weathered before your time. Your hands, the hands of a person 20 years older. And even then, there's no guarantee you'll smell better. The stink of the city clings to everything. Your hair, your breath, your bed sheets. Even the soap can't fight it. It just adds another layer of foul. In the factories where soap is made, the conditions are even worse. Workers inhale caustic fumes, their eyes watering from the heat and chemicals. Burns are routine. Death isn't unheard of. This is the irony. The very thing that's meant to clean you can kill you. But there's no alternative. No luxury of options. You use what you have, or risk being labeled unclean, unfit, undesirable. In Victorian society, purity is praised, but the tools to reach it are crude, painful, and often dangerous. Soap is not salvation. It's another hardship to endure. And like so many things in this era, it's sold with the lie that it makes you better. But all it really does is leave you raw, stinging, and still somehow dirty. Your body isn't yours. Not really. If you're a poor woman with milk to spare, that milk doesn't go to your own starving infant. It goes to the squalling newborn of a family who can afford to buy your breasts. You become a wet nurse, not by choice but by survival. You leave your child behind, often with no other nourishment, while you move into a stranger's home to feed theirs. You're given a bed in the attic, a contract with rules, and a new baby who cries in a language of entitlement. Your own baby might die before you return. Many did. The job of a wet nurse is intimate and exploitative all at once. Rich families don't want the mother to breastfeed. They fear it will ruin her figure or make her too attached. Instead, they hire someone else to take the weight. You're expected to nourish the child like your own, but not love it too much. You're watched closely. You might be forbidden from writing letters. Some households ban any visits to your real family. Your job is to be a body, a vessel, not a person. If you're lucky, you're paid. If you're unlucky, you're lied to, worked beyond your contract, and thrown out the moment your milk runs dry. And still, you are better off than many, because you're employed. But while the rich baby thrives, your own infant may weaken and die from lack of nutrition or care. The guilt eats you alive, but the poverty leaves you no other option. A dead child at home and a living one at your breast. That is the Victorian exchange. From the other side, the rich mother mourns a different kind of loss. She hands off the most delicate part of child-rearing to someone she's not allowed to truly trust. She fears that the nurse might be unclean, or worse, might influence the baby's temperament. Strange beliefs abound, that milk can carry over personality, that a nurse's anger or sadness might poison a child's nature. So every wet nurse is both needed and resented, hired and watched like a prisoner. Some infants die anyway, from tainted milk, from infection, from being passed around like parcels between one nurse and another. Others grow up disconnected, confused, distant from their mothers, who did not hold them in those first vital years. And for the nurses, even survival carries a cost. Their health declines. Their breasts ache and sag. They are spat out once they are dry, replaced, forgotten. No one truly wins in this arrangement. It's not bonding, it's commerce. The most tender act between mother and child is turned into a contract, soaked in desperation and class divide. And when it ends like most things in the Victorian Age, quietly, painfully, and without anyone daring to say the system itself is broken. You wake to a dampness between your legs and dread in your chest. It's your time of the month, but in Victorian Britain, there's no name for it that anyone dares say aloud. Menstruation is something women suffer silently, out of sight and out of mind. There are no sanitary pads, no tampons, no disposable anything. You grab the same rags you used last month, stained, scratchy, and still damp from hurried washings in cold water. If you're lucky, they don't smell yet. If you're not, you pray no one notices. There's no plumbing either. No private bathroom, no clean toilet, no warm water to scrub yourself. You change your cloths behind a door that doesn't lock, in a house with too many people and too few rooms. If you bleed through your clothes, there are no spares. You might sit through school or church or a shift at the factory with the shame of a spreading stain. And the pain. Cramps twist your insides into knots. But there are no painkillers, no hot water bottles, no sympathy. If you complain, you're weak. If you're lucky, you're merely ignored. And God help you if you're not white, wealthy, or sheltered. For working class women, menstruation is a logistical nightmare. You can't skip a shift or take a day to rest. You're expected to carry on as if nothing is happening, even when it feels like your insides are tearing apart. Laundry is done in public washhouses, where your soaked rags are scrubbed alongside strangers' sheets. You develop the skill of folding, hiding, tucking them in the folds of your dress before anyone sees. Doctors barely speak of menstruation, and when they do, they blame it for everything from hysteria to madness. Some recommend bed rest for overactive wombs. Others suggest ice packs or leeches. No one actually knows what's going on inside your body, least of all the men making decisions about it. The best advice you're likely to get is to avoid strong emotions, spicy foods, and exercise. Victorian medicine is nothing if not imaginative in its ignorance. Girls don't learn about it until it happens to them. Mothers may whisper something vague, warning about womanhood like it's a curse. There's no sex ed, no pamphlets, no knowledge passed down that isn't soaked in shame. Some girls think they're dying the first time they bleed. Others pray they won't bleed again. No one explains that this will happen every month for decades, in the same silence and pain. In the Victorian Age, the female body is both mysterious and inconvenient. You are expected to reproduce, but not to menstruate. You are expected to serve, but never suffer. And above all, you are expected to hide your blood, your pain, your fear. Even your rags must be folded out of sight. In a world that fears what it doesn't understand, your biology becomes your burden. And every month, without fail, you bleed in silence. Tea is supposed to be comfort, warmth in a cup, a ritual of calm in a world that rarely pauses. But in the Victorian Age, tea is anything but pure. It's reused leaves boiled to exhaustion, served with water that might have come straight from a cholera-infested pump. If you're poor, the leaves aren't even real, swept from shop floors, dried again, dyed with poisonous chemicals, and sold as a luxury you can barely afford. You think you're buying peace. You might be buying your own slow death. The first brew is usually reserved for the master of the house. By the time the pot makes its way down to you, if it ever does, it's more water than tea, a ghost of flavor left behind. If you're desperate, you'll reuse yesterday's leaves, boil them again, and hope it still tastes like something. Tea leaves were sold loose, and less than honest vendors would stretch their product by adding dried sloe leaves, ash leaves, or anything vaguely similar in shape. They'd be colored with copper salts or Prussian blue to mimic the real thing. One cup could calm your nerves or ruin your liver. And then there's the sugar. Rare in poor homes, and often faked just like the tea. Adulterated with plaster dust or powdered limestone. A bitter trick in a bitter cup. Milk, too, might be watered down or thickened with starch to give the illusion of richness. It could also carry diseases like tuberculosis if it came straight from the cow, which it usually did. The whole ritual of tea, with its air of civility, is a performance draped over decay. Yet still, tea is sacred. Factories ring with the sound of tea breaks. Hospitals serve it to the sick. Mothers cradle it when there's no food to give. It's what you offer a grieving neighbor, what you clutch during childbirth, what you sip when the cold has settled deep in your bones. In every poor household, there's a battered tin of leaves, kept like treasure. Even if it might kill you, it also might get you through one more hour. For the rich, tea comes with lace, porcelain cups, and servants to pour it. For the poor, it comes with rusted kettles and chipped mugs. But everyone drinks it, because the water has been boiled, because the warmth feels like something close to safety, because it's the one thing everyone agrees is worth holding on to, even if it comes laced with deceit. In the Victorian Age, tea is more than a drink. It's habit, it's hope, it's hunger and medicine and memory in a cup. Sometimes it soothes, sometimes it kills, and more often than not, it's all you have. The classroom smells of chalk dust, ink, and sweat. You sit stiff-backed on a splintered bench, hands cold, your breath fogging in the morning chill. The walls are bare, the windows drafty, and the teacher's presence is a shadow that stretches over every child in the room. Victorian schooling is not about imagination. It's about control, about obedience, about erasing the wildness from children and replacing it with quiet, rigid discipline. Your lessons begin with silence. Talking is forbidden unless invited. You lift a heavy slate or open a battered exercise book, dip your steel-nibbed pen into the inkwell, and begin to write. The ink is thick and messy, smearing if you hesitate too long, blotting the page if you press too hard. The pen is unforgiving. It catches on paper, tears your work, punishes your trembling hand. It's not just about letters and numbers. It's about learning not to make mistakes, about teaching your fingers to obey, as your body already has. Every error earns a correction, sometimes verbal, sometimes physical. The cane is never far from reach, and many children know the sting of it before they know long division. A missed homework, a smudged page, an answer muttered too softly. Each offense can lead to pain. Boys are struck across their palms or backsides. Girls might be humiliated in front of the class, made to wear dunce caps, or stand for hours facing the wall. Fear is part of the curriculum. It keeps the pupils in line. And yet, within this system of punishment and obedience, there is also ambition. A good student, one who pleases the teacher and avoids the rod, might rise. Literacy is a fragile ladder out of poverty, but it's built on shaky rungs. Paper is precious, and books are shared, worn thin with use. You memorize more than you read. Recitation is king. You chant tables, hymns, and moral stories until your voice goes hoarse. Girls and boys are taught differently. Girls learn sewing, modesty, and scripture. Boys learn Latin, history, and the burden of expectation. But for both, the ink and the fear soak in the same. Your handwriting might improve, but your knuckles stay raw. You come home exhausted, eyes aching from the strain, mind dulled by repetition. And tomorrow, you'll do it all again. In the Victorian schoolroom, knowledge isn't nurtured, it's imposed. You don't question, you copy, you conform. The ink stains on your fingers are the first mark of the machine pressing down, training you not just to think, but to think in silence, in order, in obedience. And when you leave the classroom, you carry that ink with you. Not just on your hands, but etched into your bones. By 13, you've already taken your first drag, if not from a cigarette, then from the air that surrounds you. In the Victorian era, smoking is everywhere, and no one questions it. Adults puff pipes indoors, workers smoke during breaks, and children mimic both without hesitation. You learn early that smoke isn't a vice, it's a normal part of life. Whether you're on the street, in a pub, or even in schoolyards, tobacco is passed around as casually as bread. You don't need to be a heavy smoker to fill your lungs with soot. The city does that for you. The air in Victorian cities is thick with the constant burn of coal. Factories cough black plumes into the sky without pause. Chimneys spew smoke that clings to the fog, turning it yellow, brown, and eventually black. It settles into your lungs, your clothes, your pores. You can feel it when you wake up, your chest heavy, your breath short. You cough before breakfast, and again before sleep. But no one calls it illness. They call it normal. It's what growing up in progress looks like. Even indoors, the smoke follows. Candles are replaced with gas lamps, which hiss and burn, warming rooms while releasing fumes that irritate the throat and sting the eyes. The working class, especially, has little escape. Tenement housing traps smoke like a coffin traps air. Every time someone strikes a match or lights a pipe, the atmosphere thickens, the walls darken, and your breathing gets a little more ragged. In the factories, it's worse. Machines run on steam, coal, and fire, filling massive enclosed spaces with noxious clouds. Children working the lines breathe in metal shavings, chemical dust, and carbon soot. There are no masks, no warnings. You might be 14 and already coughing blood. Nobody notices, unless your productivity drops. By adulthood, your teeth are already yellowed, your gums sore, and your lungs damaged beyond repair. Tuberculosis spreads like gossip, whispered but everywhere. If the coal dust doesn't get you, the cigarettes might. If not the cigarettes, then the gaslight fumes. You're a walking chimney, and your body is the hearth, slowly burning from within. Doctors might call it weak lungs, or a consumption tendency, but treatments are few and useless. You're advised to rest, take the air, whatever that means, when the air itself is poison. You suck in smoke because it's all you've ever known. Because it's not just a habit. It's the environment, the culture, the industry. And there's no escape. Not in the streets, not at home, not even in sleep. Your breath rattles as you lie awake. You hear the same cough in your father, your brother, your neighbors. You don't live long enough to wonder what clean lungs might feel like. In the Victorian Age, breathing is a slow death, and it's guaranteed. Playtime in the Victorian Age is not the innocent escape you might imagine. There are no rubber balls, no plastic toys, no carefully monitored playgrounds. Instead, children scramble over crumbling brick walls, dart between horses and carriages in filthy streets, and balance on the edges of canal walls slick with algae and sewage. There's no such thing as child-proof. The world itself is sharp, unpredictable, and indifferent to tiny lives. Fun is improvised, and so is the risk. A splinter might mean infection. A fall could mean a broken bone, and with it, a one-way ticket to poverty, or worse. The toys themselves are often handmade or salvaged. A spinning top carved from bone, a doll with pins for eyes. Toy soldiers molded from lead, ready to poison any child who dares to suck on them. Ragged jump ropes fray into skin-cutting cords. Even rocking horses and building blocks, if you're lucky enough to have them, are made from heavy wood and iron nails. There are no safety standards, no age recommendations. A child could lose a finger and be told to stop whining. The streets are the most common playground, and the most deadly. Carriages barrel down cobblestone roads without brakes. Steam-powered trains plow through makeshift crossings. Children chase marbles into traffic or play chicken with locomotives for a laugh. Every alley holds the threat of tetanus, rabid animals, or collapsing buildings left to rot. Don't go there means nothing when everywhere is dangerous. Supervision is rare. Parents are at work, long hours, hard labor, or drunk in the pub. Older siblings are just as reckless. It's survival through trial, error, and blood. Every bruise teaches a lesson. Every scar tells a story. Some kids vanish under wheels, behind gates, in forgotten wells, and no one mounts a search party. A missing child is a sorrow, not a crisis. When games are organized, they're still chaotic. Schoolyards are battlegrounds. Street games like kick the can or hoop and stick seem quaint now, but in reality, they were just distractions from the hunger and filth. Bare-knuckle brawls are common among boys, cheered on by adults. Girls are taught to stay clean and quiet, but even they end up climbing walls or scuffling over food scraps. And the injuries? They pile up. Broken arms are splinted with sticks and rags. Cuts are cleaned, if at all, with dirty cloth. There are no antiseptics, no emergency services. A deep gash might fester into sepsis. A cracked skull might be ignored until the child stops waking up. Pain is part of growing up. Tears are discouraged. Survival is celebrated. In the Victorian world, childhood is not a protected phase. It's a proving ground. Play is how children learn the dangers of their world, because the world does not wait for them to grow up. It punishes curiosity and rewards luck. Every game, every toy, every laugh is a gamble. And the house always wins. Disease is not an occasional tragedy in the Victorian world. It is a constant looming threat that lives in the walls, the water, and the very air. You can't walk down a street without passing a house in mourning or hearing the dry, hacking cough of tuberculosis echo from an upstairs window. It's not if illness comes, it's when. And when it does, there's little hope. The knowledge of germs is still a whisper in medical circles, not a fact in public health. Quarantine is a punishment, not protection, and hospitals are where the poor go to die, not heal. You drink from a public fountain, one shared by dozens of families and their pets. The water comes from a well fed by the same river that catches the city's sewage. You touch the doorknob of a crowded boarding house, and who knows how many infected hands touched it before you. You shake hands in the market, press coins into a vendor's palm, and in each moment, an invisible exchange may take place, one that ends in fever, vomiting, delirium. Children are most at risk, and they fall like flies. 1 in 3 might not reach their 5th birthday. They die in waves, entire classrooms emptied within a week when a fever catches hold. Mothers weep quietly because they've learned there's no point in screaming. The worst part? No one really knows how to stop it. Theories abound. Bad air, sin, poor diet, tight clothing. Solutions are few. Miasma, the belief that foul smells cause illness, drives some to burn incense or stuff herbs in their clothes. Others do nothing and simply pray they aren't next. When cholera hits, it doesn't knock. It breaks the door down. People collapse within hours. Skin turns blue, eyes sink, limbs stiffen. Whole neighborhoods are consumed in days. The dead pile up faster than they can be buried. Authorities blame the poor. Newspapers report from a distance. The truth is, everyone is vulnerable, but some die more publicly than others. Smallpox is more theatrical. It leaves its signature in pocked faces and blinded eyes. Survivors often wish they hadn't made it. Typhoid is sneakier, a killer in disguise. It mimics exhaustion, stomach flu, then turns fatal. And influenza, while seemingly mild, still sweeps through crowded housing like wildfire, taking the old and the already weak without apology. The cities are death traps, but the countryside isn't much better. Rural doctors are few and far between, and sometimes just as dangerous as the disease. They reuse tools, trust in leeches, and guess. Sanitation is worse, isolation more absolute. You're alone with your symptoms, hoping they fade instead of worsen. Every knock at the door could be a neighbor bringing soup or announcing a funeral. Every cough in the room could mark the beginning of your end. In the Victorian Age, disease is democratic. It visits the rich and poor alike. But only the rich can flee the city or buy clean water. The rest, they die where they stand. Your day begins before the sun even considers rising. The city outside is still wrapped in shadows, but you're already pulling on your rough wool dress in the dark. No fire lit, no breakfast waiting, just cold air, and the knowledge that your every movement will be judged in silence. You're a housemaid, the lowest spoke on the domestic ladder, and that means invisibility is your armor. If they notice you, it's probably because you've done something wrong. The first task is the grate. You kneel in soot and scrape out the ashes from the drawing room fireplace. The smell clings to your skin, works into your fingernails. You'll scrub it later, if there's time. You move room to room with your bucket and rag, hands red from lye and cold water, ears always alert for the creak of a floorboard or the sharp click of a lady's boot. You know your employer's moods better than your own reflection. She expects silence, speed, perfection. If she's generous, she might not yell. Your bed is a cot in the attic, if you're lucky enough to have your own. Many housemaids share cramped quarters, sometimes with rats, sometimes with other staff who snore or sob into the night. Privacy is a forgotten concept. You sleep in your underclothes because you're too tired to undress. You dream of bells ringing, and then wake to them. You don't eat with the family. You eat what's left over, if there is any. Sometimes it's bread soaked in grease, sometimes cold potatoes, sometimes nothing at all. You steal sips of water behind cupboard doors. Hunger is an old friend. Pain is a roommate. And loneliness? She whispers constantly. You write letters you never send. You sing songs under your breath that you learned from a mother you haven't seen in years. There's a hierarchy even among the servants. The cook gives orders. The butler doesn't bother with your name. If the scullery maid is sick, you do her job too. No one asks. They just hand you another chore. You clean fireplaces, chamber pots, and stains that won't come out. You polish floors until your back feels broken. And when a child throws up or a dog soils the carpet, you're the one who kneels. You see things, conversations through half-open doors, flirtations in stairwells, tears behind fans. But you keep quiet. If you speak, you might lose your post. And losing your post means losing your bed, your bread, your threadbare sense of purpose. You don't belong to yourself anymore. You belong to the household, and your value is in your silence. Your day ends after theirs. You blow out the candles they've left burning. You smooth the wrinkles on their bedsheets. You tiptoe past their dreams, careful not to wake them. And then, for a few hours, you lie still and try to forget the faces, the dirt, the cold. You don't complain. You don't cry. You simply vanish, like smoke up the chimney. That's what's expected. Coal is your warmth, your light, your curse. It crackles in the fireplace, the only defense against the biting cold of a Victorian winter. Without it, the damp would creep up your bones until your joints locked in place. But with it, well, you breathe in slow death. Every lump of coal you burn fills the room with soot, coats the walls with grime, and clings to your lungs like wet wool. The air turns heavy, never quite clear. You cough in your sleep. You wake up coughing. You live in a fog of your own survival. The fire is the heart of the house, and it beats with black dust. Children carry the coal in scuttles from the cellar, their fingers cracked and blackened. The smoke never leaves their skin. Women scrape the ash from the hearth each morning, their aprons smudged with the same gray fingerprints. And above it all, chimney stacks belch thick clouds into the sky, day after day, street after street. London becomes a graveyard in disguise, foggy, dark, and breathless. The famous pea soupers that choke the streets aren't natural weather. They're poison disguised as atmosphere. Your lungs suffer first. They fill with coal dust and tar. You wheeze at 20. You spit blood at 30. There's no name for your illness yet, but they'll call it black lung one day. Until then, it's just a slow drowning. You can't escape. Doctors don't help. They might give you laudanum to dull the pain, or suggest a change of air. Laughable when you can't afford to leave your neighborhood, let alone the city. Clothes absorb the coal smoke. So do your curtains, your bedding, your food. Bread tastes faintly of ash. Your hair smells like you've just walked through a furnace, and that's if you're lucky enough to afford coal. If not, you gather what scraps you can, burning sticks, old rags, even dried dung. These smoke worse, but heat's heat. The poor burn anything just to keep the frost from claiming their fingers. The coal doesn't just destroy from the inside, it shapes the very world you live in. Entire towns exist only because of coal mines. Families are born, buried, and broken beside the pits. Miners descend each morning into the black lungs of the earth, emerging hours later, wheezing and hunched. Accidents are frequent. Explosions are common. But the demand never stops. Coal keeps factories running, ships sailing, and houses from freezing. So the men keep digging. The children follow. Coal is currency, and the Victorian world runs on its fumes. It's in every breath you take, every shadow on the wall, every shiver you try to silence. You burn it because you must, and it burns you right back. In the end, there's no clean air to breathe, no true warmth to hold on to, only the choking knowledge that to stay alive in the Victorian age, you must inhale your own undoing. Toothaches don't wait for appointments. They throb in the middle of the night, behind thin walls and colder blankets. In the Victorian age, a bad tooth isn't a nuisance, it's a crisis. The pain starts small, then grows into something monstrous. You can't eat, you can't sleep, your breath stinks of rot, and the cure is almost worse than the disease. Dentists, if you can call them that, often work out of barbershops or back rooms. Their tools are crude: iron forceps, pliers, even screwdrivers. Anesthetic? Maybe a swig of gin. More likely just a strong grip and prayers that you don't faint. If the agony lasts long enough, you might consider selling your tooth. Yes, selling. The dental trade is so desperate that people will pay for whole, healthy human teeth to be implanted in the mouths of the wealthy. Young, poor, and healthy? That smile might be worth a few shillings. The well-off don't want false ivory if they can afford your real enamel. It's called a tooth transplant, but it's anything but surgical. No sterilization, no matching, just your tooth jammed into their gum and your mouth left with a bloody gap that aches every time you breathe. Even without the sale, extraction is the default solution. Fillings exist, but they're rare and expensive, often made of lead, which only poisons you slowly instead of solving the problem. So if your molar is cracked, infected, or simply decaying from the endless diet of chalked bread and sugary tea, out it comes. Dentists rarely know what they're doing. Some just pull whatever looks loose. Others remove the wrong tooth entirely. There's no follow-up care, no antibiotics, just a mouthful of blood and the hope the infection doesn't spread to your brain. False teeth are a horror all their own. The cheapest are carved from wood, prone to rotting and splintering. The more refined versions are made from animal bone, ivory, or real human teeth, taken from the mouths of corpses. Soldiers fallen on battlefields are sometimes looted for their molars, which wind up in the smiles of aristocrats sipping wine at the opera. It's grim, but it's business. Death feeds beauty in the Victorian age. Children aren't spared either. Rotten baby teeth are pulled early, often with kitchen tools. The bleeding is heavy. The fear is worse. And once they're gone, they're gone. Orthodontics doesn't exist. If your teeth grow crooked, gapped, or overlapping, so be it. You live with a crooked smile and the constant whisper of pain behind your gums. To live in the Victorian era is to live with the constant hum of dental misery. Every bite you take might chip something. Every sip might send lightning through your jaw. You don't go to the dentist to get better. You go to survive. And if you're lucky, You walk out with a few less teeth and a little less pain. If you're unlucky, you don't walk out at all. Education in the Victorian era is a luxury, not a right. The idea of universal schooling exists only in reformers' dreams, while reality plays out in cold rooms and empty bellies. For many families, the cost of sending a child to school, pennies for books, pence for a desk, a few shillings a term, is more than they spend on meals. You must choose between a few hours with the alphabet or a loaf of bread that feeds the family. And for most, bread wins. Illiteracy is not a failure. It's a survival tactic. If you are sent to school, it's likely a ragged school, a charity institution meant to teach the poorest of the poor. The buildings are crumbling, the windows drafty, the teachers underpaid and overwhelmed. You sit on splintered benches beside children who haven't bathed in weeks, your fingers too cold to grip the slate properly. There are no school lunches, no heating, no sympathy. Discipline is strict, often brutal. Whisper during a lesson, expect a smack. Fail your spelling, you might be caned. And if you show up barefoot, as many children do, you'll be punished for indecency while your feet freeze on the stone floor. Curriculum, when it exists, is minimal. Reading, writing, and arithmetic, enough to work a till or read a sign, nothing more. History is nationalistic myth. Science is almost non-existent, and geography might be taught with a map so outdated that countries no longer exist. Girls, if educated at all, are steered towards sewing and housekeeping. After all, their futures lie in marriage or servitude, not scholarship. And boys are rarely encouraged to think beyond labor. The moment they are strong enough, their education ends, replaced by factory shifts or apprenticeships. Books give way to coal dust. Even wealth doesn't guarantee a proper education. Private tutors may be incompetent. Boarding schools are infamous for cruelty and cold. Sons of the upper class are taught Latin and manners, but not empathy. Daughters learn music and French, but not freedom. Everyone is molded to fit a role, not to question it. Creativity is discouraged. Curiosity is dangerous. Learning is for status, not liberation. For those who fall between classes, too poor for real schooling, too proud for charity, their only chance at literacy may come from night classes or self-teaching. A discarded newspaper, a borrowed Bible, a chalkboard scribbled in secret. A few words learned by candlelight can feel like a revolution. But the climb out of ignorance is steep, and the rungs are rotten. So when you hear that Victorian children lacked education, don't picture a school without books. Picture a society that never expected them to rise. A system that shackled young minds to poverty as tightly as it bound small bodies to labor. To learn to read is to defy the odds, and to read well, that's a rebellion. In the Victorian Age, you don't own your life, your reputation does. Before you speak, before you dress, before you even step outside your door, you're already being judged. The clothes you wear, the way you walk, who you're seen with, what time you return home, it all builds or breaks your image. And in this society, appearance is survival. A single whisper in the wrong ear can cost you your job, your housing, your family. Reputation is a phantom that haunts every waking moment, and once it turns against you, it never lets go. If you're a woman, your virtue is the centerpiece of your worth. Smile too often? Flirt without meaning to? Walk home alone at dusk? You're labeled. And once you're seen as impure, you might as well be invisible to decent society, except when it mocks or blames you. Employment is off the table, marriage is out of reach, and respect is a fantasy. One accusation, true or not, clings like coal dust and never washes off. Even widows must tread carefully, expected to mourn in black for years, lest they be seen as eager or indecent. Your body, your emotions, your history, they belong to the court of public opinion. For men, the stakes are no less punishing. You are expected to be composed, clean, and employed. If you're not working, you're a vagrant. If you lose your temper, you're dangerous. If your clothes are torn or your speech too rough, you're judged as unfit. Pride doesn't put food on the table, but it might be the only thing keeping your dignity intact. And still, a rumor of drunkenness, a whisper of debt, or the suggestion of cowardice can bar you from society faster than any conviction. The middle class lives in constant fear of slipping. One scandal, one illness, one missed rent payment, and you fall into the underclass. And the fall is irreversible. There's no safety net, no second chances. Charity comes with judgment, and confession invites shame. So families pretend. They polish their boots and silence their coughs. They hang lace curtains over moldy walls and scrub every surface of their homes, except the truth. Respectability isn't about who you are. It's about who you can convince others you are. And maintaining the illusion takes everything. And still, gossip seeps through keyholes and under doors. Servants spread stories. Neighbors talk. Clergy hint. You live in a social minefield, surrounded by smiling faces that might be carrying daggers. In church pews and tea shops, in boarding houses and parlor rooms, you're always being watched, always being weighed. In a world where shame equals exile, and exile means death by slow poverty, reputation isn't just social, it's existential. There's no room to be complicated, no room to make mistakes. You perform your role, or you perish. That's the phantom of respectability. It doesn't just follow you, it controls you. In Victorian society, suffering is not a private affliction, it's a public expectation. From the moment you're old enough to walk, you're taught that pain is part of your place in the world. Whether it's physical, emotional, or spiritual, you endure it quietly. To cry out, to show weakness, is to invite disgrace. Even children learn fast. Tears are shameful, complaints are selfish, and comfort is a luxury for someone richer, someone cleaner, someone more important. Pain isn't something you heal from, it's something you carry. A young girl biting her lip as her corset is tightened, her ribs grinding against bone. A boy holding back tears as the cane lands again and again on his knuckles for a misspelled word. A woman miscarrying alone because her husband is at work and the doctor costs more than food. A man coughing blood into a handkerchief and then hiding it in his coat so he can finish his shift at the mill. These are not tragedies. They're daily occurrences, and none of them will be spoken of. You clean yourself up, you stand straighter, and you keep moving. Because nobody cares how much it hurts, only that you don't make a scene. Religious teachings reinforce the message. Suffering is noble. It purifies the soul. The poor are blessed, the meek are holy, and those who cry silently will be rewarded in the next life. So you bite down on your grief, your hunger, your fear, and convince yourself it's all part of some divine plan. The clergy preach that complaining is a sin of pride, and any desire for comfort or relief is evidence of spiritual weakness. So your only salvation is silence. Even among family, there's little room for vulnerability. A mother who shows pain might scare her children. A father who falters might be seen as weak. So no one speaks. People die of cancer, of infection, of heartbreak, quietly, without diagnosis or sympathy. Neighbors whisper that so-and-so has taken to bed, but no one asks why. No one visits. To show pain is to ask for help, and help is rarely given freely. Better to suffer alone than risk being pitied, or worse, scorned. Hospitals are filled with stoic faces, workhouses with empty eyes, parlors with silent grief. Emotional restraint is so deeply embedded in the culture that it becomes indistinguishable from character. Those who endure the most are praised, not pitied. To suffer quietly is to earn respect, even if it kills you, especially if it kills you. And so, generation after generation learns to bury pain beneath manners, to mask agony with routine. The Victorian Age doesn't admire resilience, it demands it. There is no room for weakness. You aren't allowed to feel better. You're expected to get better at not feeling at all. The sun sets like a slow bruise over a city that never felt warm to begin with. You've made it through the gauntlet of a Victorian day, but it hasn't left you whole. Your body is an inventory of pain, blisters on your feet, soot in your lungs, and the ever-present churn of hunger. Your mind isn't much better. Fear has been your companion from morning to night. Fear of losing work, fear of sickness, fear of the cold, fear of what happens when the thin thread of survival finally snaps. There's no rest waiting for you, just a damp cot or a creaking floorboard under someone else's roof. The mattress, if you have one, is stuffed with straw that stinks of mold and hides a population of fleas and lice. You scratch in your sleep without realizing it. You cough until you taste iron. And you try not to think about the rats that move through the shadows like rumors. If you live in a tenement, you share your walls with dozens of others, their coughing echoing through the plaster like a death march. If you live in the street, the chill settles into your bones like a second skeleton. The candle burns low, if you could afford one. Darkness presses in from every side. It's not quiet. Somewhere, someone is crying. Somewhere, someone is screaming. Somewhere, a baby won't wake up. You lie still, not because you're comfortable, but because movement makes it worse. You don't want to attract attention. You don't want to be remembered. The safest thing in this world is invisibility. And yet, even sleep is dangerous. Fires break out with no warning. Disease creeps in while your body is defenseless. Your dreams offer no refuge. They replay the things you tried not to notice. The man crushed under a wagon wheel, the girl coughing blood, the old woman begging for food. You wake up with a start, not sure if you're still dreaming. But it doesn't matter, because morning is already creeping toward you, and it promises nothing but repetition. One day in the Victorian Age is too much. One night, too cruel. But the worst part isn't what you've endured. It's the knowledge that tomorrow will demand it all over again. The same filth, the same fear, the same absence of choice. And no one will come to save you. No one is even looking. Because in this age, survival isn't a miracle. It's a sentence. And if you live to see another morning, it won't be because the world was kind. It will be because you had no other option. You're not alive. You're just not dead yet.